patrol, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all connected but separated, misunderstood and so frustrated. A million armies of one have invaded, watching you and watching me. We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong. I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. The little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching have taken over. We the people, our little brother, standing by to dethrone each other, watching you and watching me. Paranoid, the lens is our weapon, desensitized in our lust for attention, democratized by our voyeur obsessions, watching you and watching me. Slaves to perfection, don't let them project you as you are. Reveal your every flaw. I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Stay in line, don't make a mistake. We're watching. We've watched you for so long. We wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching
Let your experience begin right now. From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio. You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter, @SpacedOutRadio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride as we are live on Spaced Out Radio.
Sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to Space Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, and it's good to have you along for the ride wherever you are on this great planet we call Earth. Mr. Bumblefoot rocking us into the show. We are live right here in Uncle Jimbo's cabin, right here in the Great White North on this Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning. If you're on the East Coast, let's welcome in everyone listening in on spacedoutradio.com, on Spreaker, on the United Public Radio Network, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and on Revolution Radio. We do this thing every night of the week as we rock in and out of every show, thanks to our resident guitar god, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses. Bumblefoot is the official sound of SOR. Hey, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so at Spaced Out Radio on Twitter. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Find us on TuneIn, download this show and others from iTunes, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. If you want to take part in this show, you'll have to sign into one of the 4 chat rooms that are following along right on Revolution Radio, on Spreaker, on the UPRN chat room, and on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. If you haven't signed up for the SOR Space Travelers Club on our website yet, you want to do so pretty quick. It's only $5 a month. With that, your name gets entered into monthly prize draws. You get access to private group interviews, access to a special section on our website, and much more. Hey, we're going to give you a hell of a lot more than just access to our archives. Well, on our website, you can read our latest blogs, check out Eric Markham's SOR Spacewire for your latest and weird news. And if you had a sighting that you just can't figure out, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our researcher Mike Schmidt is ready to find out what's going on. All personal information is 100% confidential. We say hello to everyone listening in on our affiliate, the United Public Radio Network, on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 160 countries around the world. Good to have you along for the ride. And remember, if you're listening in to Revolution Radio, it is the largest nonprofit online station going today. We need your support. Make sure you take the time to visit freedomslips.com and donate today. Okay, yeah, I admit it. After the experiences I've had personally, I'm a little abashed to say gnomes scared the living daylights out of me. Maybe it's the stories of my daughter seeing them in the shadows of the street lamp when she was younger. I don't know. They're creepy and just, I don't even know how to explain it. But tonight, I am facing my fears with the paranormalist. John Carlson was supposed to come on Space Out Radio a couple of months ago, but it was a show that I unfortunately had to cancel due to a migraine, but we're glad to get John on, and tonight is seriously going to be a trip. John goes by the Paranormalist because he loves everything to do with the umbrella term. Doesn't matter if it's gnomes, missing time, Bigfoot, aliens, whatever strange it could be, John is investigating it. It's a question on finding out what is reality and what is not. People, including John, have had some amazingly strange and sometimes terrifying experiences. Stories the average person just doesn't make up. John's website is theparanormalist.com to check out some of his paranormal writing and theories as to what's happening in this strange world we live in. We bring John Carlson into Spaced Out Radio tonight. Good to have you along for the ride, John. How you been?
Pretty good. How you doing, Dave? Thanks for having me.
I am doing great, actually. You know, we're building this audience. We're 25,000 plus strong now, and it is starting to become a little bit of a fun ride here on a nightly basis because you never know what's going to happen. And I do know with the mention of the G word, my audience in the chat rooms are going to go absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts on me tonight. I can just feel it. They love to torture me with these damn gnomes, John.
They know you have a thing for gnomes, huh?
Yeah, and you know what?
Yeah.
They're cruel about it. They're very cruel. I expect the pictures and the comments to start any moment, and then I'm just done. You know, it's going to rattle me. I can tell. My friend, I want to thank you for coming on because the last time, like I said in my intro, we tried to have you on. I had to cancel a couple hours before the show. I was hit with a horrible migraine. And I'm just thankful that you didn't take that personally and that you decided to come back and do this with us.
Oh yeah, no trouble. You know, I've had those before. They stink. So I'm glad you got over it quickly.
Well, I can tell you this, my friend. Right after I hung up the phone with you to cancel the show, I actually went to try and eat some dinner, and I was seeing black and white. That's never a good sign. Never a good sign. But
not at all.
We're happy, we're healthy, and I got a good beard going on right now, so I'm pretty good with it right now. We'll just run with it.
Good.
My friend, I would love our audience to know a little bit about you. You know, you write The Paranormalist. You've had a podcast in the past, and this is a topic that is just thoroughly intriguing to you. What brought you to this point where you figured you wanted to, you know, as a sub-career, learn more about what is really strange going on?
I have some family history, specifically with my mother, and I've had some of my own strange experiences, but my mom was sort of predisposed to this sort of thing, primarily in the forms of more premonitions and precognitive sort of dreams. She had some really, throughout her life, very frighteningly accurate precognitive dreams. They often were not good. If she had a dream about you, you were in trouble. But it was something that really disturbed her. And my mother was a very upbeat, happy person, and rarely saw her without a smile on her face. But whenever she would have one of these, what she used to call one of her witchy dreams, I could always tell when that happened. I could see that it would bother her, and she had a couple of supernatural sorts of experiences as well, visitations from deceased relatives and that sort of thing. And, my mother was not somebody that was really had any particular fascination with this sort of thing. She was a very devout Catholic woman and went to church every Sunday, and did my older brother and sister and I, and but she was throughout her life. She had these various kind of paranormal sort of experiences, and that always fascinated me, because I always wondered what that meant. How could she know something that had yet to have happened? How does that make any logical sense? And it just always made me question the nature of reality. And then when I was a young child, I began having some of my own strange experiences. Those continued on and off until about my mid-teens, and then throughout my life, I've had some other strange experiences, but the most activity was when I was younger. And with a few exceptions over the years as I became an adult. And then 2 years ago, I had an extremely strange experience, and so it was kind of returned back into came back into my life a bit, and it's made me really kind of question things that much further. So it makes mostly this kind of family history, myself and my mother. That's really how I had this interest in kind of all things unknown and strange.
It's really weird, John, how the experiences, whether it's passed from your mother to you or to people that you know, it's weird how the experiences can take a break. But for some reason, somewhere down the line, you always get dragged back in. It's like there's this continuous eternal rope that's around you. And every time you think you're free of it, boom, something happens where you get a tug around your waist and off you're being dragged again into the paranormal world. Yeah,
very much. You know, I've always sensed it throughout my life, even when I wasn't having any conscious, active experiences. But even my wife has told me over the years that, I have frequent dreams, and sometimes I remember them, and sometimes I don't. But I often thrash around in my sleep, and I wake her up, and she says sometimes I'm either kind of doing this muffled scream, or I'm babbling in some sort of language that she doesn't understand. And I think I've been plagued with these kinds of dreams and this kind of strange sense of something going on, sort of in the background of my life for since I was a child, And then, like I said, it just kind of flared up on me again about 2.5 years ago. In June of 2014, I had a kind of a recurrence of this, so kind of that much more dramatically. So we can get to that whenever you want. But yeah, I've had a number of strange occurrences. I had a period of missing time when I was in my mid-teens. And I wrote about that on my blog. And I think of all of the articles that I wrote on my blog, that was the one that I got the most response from. I was really amazed to find how many people responded to that and left me comments in the comment section about their own experiences, or emailed me privately. And a lot of them were, I can't believe that, I came across your site. I'm so happy that, I see that other people have had this sort of experiences. And there's a lot of people out there, I think, that suffer from these sorts of things, and they don't really know what to make of them. And it's a difficult thing to live with, especially if you feel isolated. You feel like maybe there's something wrong with you, and you don't know who you can talk to without, fear of, being perceived as having some kind of mental illness or, other problems. So it's a difficult thing to live with, but it's been interesting to see, through my writing, and how many people have responded to some of the articles. I'd say the missing time was the one that I got the most response from. The other one being probably my gnome article. So people seem to have a real fascination with that too.
Oh, that subject. Yeah. You're just making shivers go down my spine when you mention that. You know what, John? One of the things that I have noticed since I started Spaced Out Radio, and tomorrow night is our 2-year anniversary show. And one of the things that thank you so much. And one of the things I have noticed over time is if you're the first one to kind of step out onto the balcony and tell people aloud, I'm having experiences and it's okay. It's amazing how many people rush up to you and say, I'm glad someone else has done this. I didn't have the courage to do that. Do you find that a lot with the people who follow you? Because they're scared. People don't want to be considered crazy, or they don't want to be not believed. They don't want to be thought of as that person with the weird story. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of people, because of the way society is, they just don't want to go down that road, even though it's driving them nuts. They can't explain what has happened to them. So do you find that you're almost like a caregiver of sorts for people who just don't have the strength to have their own voice?
Yes, I think if anything is positive about my writing and about getting involved in this is that, I've been able to, a lot of people have responded to the things that I wrote and have contacted me, and, they've really expressed some relief to know that there are other people that have had these sorts of experiences. And it's tremendously disturbing and difficult when you're suddenly faced with something that just flies in the face of what you believe to be reality. And it's very, very difficult, and I really feel for a lot of these people. And it seems to me that often these experiences go throughout their whole lives, and they're not always isolated to one particular type of experience. What I say almost every time, in fact, I put a questionnaire on my website, and I ask this specifically, is if somebody reports, I have like an incident report form that I put on my website, and one of the questions I ask is, what other experiences, if any, have you had? And almost always, if somebody reports like, well, I had a Bigfoot sighting, or I had some sort of a ghost encounter, or something like that, almost always they've had other experiences. They may be saying, well, this thing happened to me. And at the end of the conversation, I always ask, well, what else has happened to you? Have you had anything? And almost always it's part of a larger pattern in their lives that they said, well, now that you mentioned it, I've had this thing happen to me. It may be unrelated even to what they're initially reporting. But, you told me yourself when we were speaking earlier, you've had kind of a plethora of different types of experiences and encounters. And so I think, this is not my original concept. I've heard it said before. There are certain people that are experiencers. They seem to be open to this sort of having these experiences or encounters with the unknown. What that means, I'm not quite sure. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
John, have you noticed as you've learned about people's stories that, as you mentioned, it doesn't just stick to one genre of the paranormal? I know for myself, it started off with a channeling session when I didn't even know what channeling was. It moved over to ghosts and spirits, then over to Bigfoot, then UFOs, then alien contact. Do you notice that people are starting to run the whole gamut more rather than just, say, having a ghostly experience in a house or maybe a UFO sighting in the sky?
Yes, that seems to be the case. I can give you an example of that, and then I hear this really frequently. Like I said, it is somebody who says, well, I saw a gnome or something. And they're more often than not say, and I've also had this sort of experience, that sort of another type of experience, maybe UFO sighting, and I can give you a specific example on that. There's a couple from Canada. A woman contacted me through my blog. I'm sure she left me. I think she emailed me privately, in fact. Or sometimes people leave the comment or communicate me through the comments sections within my articles. But a lot of times people don't want to leave their information or tell their stories publicly. So I get a lot of emails sent to me privately. And I don't share anything or give out any names of whomever contacts me, of course. And I let them know that. But I had a lady from Canada who said she and her husband were asleep in their bed one night, and she woke up and there was a small gnome-like, gnome for lack of a better word, with a gnome standing on her bed, looking at her. There's a creepy story that would probably make my hair fall out if that happened. But so she woke up and she was staring at this thing and kind of unbelievingly, not sure if she was awake or dreaming. And then I guess she stirred and her husband woke up and saw this little being standing on their bed looking at them, and he screamed, and she screamed, and this little thing, their cat jumped up onto the bed and hissed at this little guy, and it jumped off onto their windowsill. And it was summertime. They didn't have an air conditioner. They just had their window open, and it pushed on the screen, and the screen fell down into the yard, and it jumped down. And they ran to the window, and they saw it run across the yard into the woods that's adjacent to their property. She said as it ran, it turned into a cat. It like morphed into a cat. And she said it was this cat that had been coming around for the past year, and she and her husband had been feeding it, and it would just run back into the forest. And it's a strange story, right? She said, I would have thought I was dreaming it or hallucinating or something, but my husband woke up and saw the little man also, a little guy dressed in a typical sort of gnome outfit. I think she even said it had a pointy hat and all. And she said they saw it jump from the bed and onto the windowsill, and then out through the window and down into the yard, and then it kind of morphed into a cat. So, I asked her, I said, have you or your husband had any other sorts of experience? And as it turns out, I think, I wasn't sure if it was her or her husband had a Bigfoot sighting, and I think it was her husband had, and she had had a number of encounters or sightings of ghosts throughout her life. So, like I said, it's almost always when I ask that question, it's very rare that somebody says, no, this was just a singular experience. I never had any other strange activities or incidents in my life. It's almost always part of some sort of pattern that goes throughout people's lives.
And one of the things that people see is they see what they believe they are seeing. Whether or not it's true, nobody can really know because we haven't had that experience. I know this summer, my family does this hobby called geocaching, and I was taking my 3-year-old son. We were having some daddy-son time, and we were geocaching along one of the trails along a lake here. And I had him in the stroller because we're getting into bear season at that point. And bear droppings all over the trail. You just have to be careful. And anyhow, so I start pushing him down this hill. And just a little knoll that we are going down along the lake trail, and I swear to God, about 15 feet in front of me, this little thing comes prancing out of the trees on my left, which is the side the lake is on, and it walks about 2 or 3 steps onto the trail, stops, sees us, and takes off back into where it came from. Now, this thing looked like a piece of wood with arms and legs. Now, the arms and legs were like cartoonish type thin. There was no head. I couldn't see a face, but the one thing I remember, John, was that it was blurry the entire time. And it weirded me out. I've never seen anything like that. I talked to a native friend of mine who said, oh, that's a wood nymph. They make sure the trees and everything are protected. They protect the forests around. And so me being kind of personally allergic to gnomes, as you know, I got the hell out of there as quickly as possible, but
close enough to a gnome.
Exactly. But you have to try and enjoy the experience, because when you have that experience, you never know if it's going to come again. So for these people who are having this, like this gnome shapeshifter, do you see something along those lines as a once-off experience, or is it happening multiple times to the people you're talking to?
That specific experience may happen more than once. When she had told me about this, I think it had been this lady who reported this gnome incident. And I've had actually a lot of reports of various kinds of little people activities and sightings, encounters. But that one always impressed me. And I think it was something that had happened a number of years prior to her telling me about it, and I don't know that that specific report had that type of incident had happened to that woman or her husband again. But sometimes they're repeat experiences, and sometimes it's, like I said, it's something that may be completely unrelated, seemingly unrelated. Now, I think it was either her or her husband had a Bigfoot. One of them had a Bigfoot encounter. Another one had a number of ghost sightings or encounters. So they've had other kinds of strange activity that, and I realize that people that are interested in these subjects oftentimes like to sort of compartmentalize. They don't like to mix. Bigfoot sighting has nothing to do with, a gnome sighting or ghosts or anything like that. I'm not so sure if they're really that, if they're not related. I feel that maybe there could be a connection between all these sort of paranormal experiences personally. But, I'm at this, what I do really is just kind of collect stories, and I do a lot of reading, and I'm just trying to figure out what all this might mean. That's kind of where I am. I don't really have any answers about any of this, but I'm trying to understand it. And it's one of those things. The more you hear about it, and the more stories you collect, and I try to gather data and look for patterns among all these stories and reports that I receive, and it just kind of gets more confused, I think, as you go further, you get into it. But my feeling is, my sense is that there is a connection between a lot of these, seemingly separate, disparate phenomena. I don't know. Do you feel that way at all, or?
Absolutely. And you know what? One of the things, John, that I'm impressed with what you were saying is, I love how you use the word paranormal as an umbrella statement, that it all falls under the umbrella. Too many people out there, and I learned this from a gentleman who is very close to this show. His name's Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal in Washington State. Too many people fall under the banner that paranormal is just ghosts. And for you to fully understand it's a blanket term, I think really says the maturity in the stories you're collecting and the research you're doing. Because like you, I wouldn't be doing this show if there wasn't something going on. And I think too many shows out there, whether it's television, whether it's radio, whether it's magazines, we've forgotten about the experiencer. We've forgotten about the people who are having these experiences because we're pushing so hard for disclosure and government cover-ups and the quote-unquote science of it all, that the people all of a sudden, for a lot of investigators and researchers, just don't matter anymore. Are you finding that as well?
Yeah, I am, and we're very focused on I think trying to get scientific answers, and I don't know that any of this can really be explained scientifically. I think if that's going to be the criteria, that getting scientific evidence is necessary to prove that all this or any of this is real, quote unquote, I think that's a dead end road. I don't think that we're ever going to get that. We're not ever going to be able to put any of this under a microscope and take it into the laboratory and test it. I think that's not going to happen. But it does not mean that it's not real, that it's not actually happening to people. And that's not to say that every story I hear I automatically believe or I assume that it's paranormal. I always look to the more mundane explanation first. And I don't encourage people to believe that, they're under some sort of attack or they're being personally haunted in some way. I usually try and go to the more, the explanation that is less, that's not necessarily the paranormal one, but you can't really deny that there are people that have these experiences. Like, again, I go back to my mother. I mean, how did she know that these things would happen before they happened? I had two uncles that both passed away on the same night. My mother's older sister and her younger sister, their husbands. And my mother was dreaming about these two uncles. They lived next door to each other in Brooklyn, New York. And my mother was having these awful dreams for about a year before they passed away, of them drowning in this pool of black water and this churning black water. And she would always wake up and would be all upset, and she was worrying about, her brother-in-law, Vinny, and her brother-in-law, Jimmy. And then on the morning of the 4th of July, 1975, she woke up at about 4 in the morning. I'm just using, this is probably an example of the most dramatic incident of my mother's precognitive dreams, but she woke up and in this, with another one of these dreams. And in this dream, she came to this pool of black churning water again. My two uncles were in there struggling to keep their heads above the water. And her mother, my grandmother, was at the edge of the water in this dream. And in the dream, my mother said, Mom, we have to help Jimmy and Vinny. And she just looked at her and shook her head as if to say, it's too late. And then as she did that, they sunk under the waves of this, under the water, surface of the water. And she woke up all upset, in a sweat and heart pounding. And about 10 minutes later, the phone rang. It was my aunt. My uncle's, the older uncle was having a heart attack in the middle of the night. My aunt called next door to her sister and brother-in-law, and she ran over there, and both my aunts and my mother, I think all the women, there were 5 of them, and my mother's family, they were all nurses, and they were upstairs attending to my uncle who was having a heart attack in his bedroom. The younger uncle went in the kitchen, got on the telephone, was calling the doctor, calling an ambulance. He got all upset. He had a heart attack. He dropped dead on the kitchen floor, and they died within a few minutes of each other. Horrible family tragedy. We still feel the effects of that in our family. It was a terrible, terrible day. But my mother was dreaming about this, and for a year before it happened, at least. And then the morning of, she had this really terrible dream, which I think seemingly occurred at the same time, right about the time they both died. I mean, they died within a few minutes of each other. I look at things like that. I say, well, there's no logical, there's no scientific explanation. You can't say, well, my mother was lying. She had things like that to varying degrees throughout her whole life. She had another time where her older sister visited her, and their brother, my uncle, had some bad news, and her sister had passed away several years earlier, and she saw her one day in her bedroom. She turned, and there was my aunt, and she said, "Call Buddy, call their brother." She said, "He needs you," and then disappeared. And then a moment later, the phone rang. It was actually my uncle, and my uncle his wife had passed away of breast cancer a couple of years earlier, and my mother had gotten on the phone and said, "What's the matter?" Right away, as soon as she heard his voice. Said, "What's wrong?" And he said, he goes, his daughter had been diagnosed, my cousin had been diagnosed with breast cancer. So, and there was, the good news was she had a lumpectomy, and she's fine now. This is, 15 years later. So, but, she all of a sudden she turns around. There's her deceased sister standing there saying, "Call our brother, he needs you." And, even before she even got a chance to call him, the phone rang, and there it was, And my mother wasn't crazy. She was a very nice, normal, church-going lady. She was, but she had these experiences, and there's no logical explanation for things like that. And there's no logical explanation, no scientific explanation for the experiences I've had in my life. I mean, there's something going on that is that it for one thing, it often seems to be family related. It seems to be something that if you're having it, very often it's passed down from your parents, maybe grandparents or aunt and uncle. It tends to run the family. That's one thing that I've noticed very often is the case. And a lot of times you may be attracted to people, or you may attract people into your life who have had those sorts of experiences as well. I thought you had said maybe earlier that your wife has had some sightings or experiences herself.
My wife is very, very empathic, and she has had experiences. She probably gets taken, she figures, about once every 3 to 4 weeks. And,
really? She said.
Yeah, and she's okay with it. She's never had any markings on her, never any scratches or anything. She never feels bad. I mean, sometimes she feels sluggish and tired in the morning. She has had a Bigfoot sighting back in 2013 while we were out ATVing in the backwoods of where we lived at the time. And so, even around our home, she is always being followed by spirit or something. And the funny part about it is my 3-year-old now is actually starting to see. And that's interesting to watch, because we're the type of people where we're not going to block that, and we want him to find his own path and everything like that. But, it's just something where we're not going to block him from doing anything that could harm him. We're not going to play it as the imaginary friend or anything like that. And if more parents, I think, did that, not saying that we're perfect parents, but if more parents did that, it'd be a wonder to see where some of these so-called sightings are and how people would approach life before they get blocked by school, by parents, by vivid imaginations, as it's so-called.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, my early childhood experiences, they started when I was about 4, and my parents said, "Oh, you're their dreams," And what are they going to say? I don't blame them for saying that, and I'm sure that's what they thought. They said, "Oh, you're just having bad dreams." But I started when we were. My father's job moved us around quite a bit. I'm the baby of the family. My brother is 14 years older, and my sister's 12 years older. So they had actually moved a couple of times before I was born. And my folks are from Brooklyn, New York, and they started out there. Where after they got married, then they lived in Baltimore, Maryland, and then they moved to Long Island, New York, where I was born. And on my 4th birthday, this all be due to my dad's job. He was a salesman for a paper company. And then we moved up to Wellesley, Massachusetts, and on my 4th birthday in August. I started to have immediately, almost, I think, since after we moved into that house, I started having these kind of night terrors. The way my parents explained it, pitched it to me, it was night terrors, the nightmares. But, I had these entity visitations that went on for almost the full 5 years that we lived in the house. And, my mother and my parents said, "Oh, they're just bad dreams." I spent my life trying to convince myself that they were just bad dreams, but they definitely were not. They were very similar, I guess, in some ways to the alien abduction phenomena, but the beings that I used to see were short, squat, black entities with with like glowing eyes, and yeah, I mean, what do you do when your child comes to you with these stories? Or I sort of worry about that. For my boys are getting older now; they're 19 and 17. The older one's off at college now, but you know, I sort of don't want them to inherit what I've struggled with. And you know, one of them told me they had some sort of sleep paralysis. My older boy, not too long ago. I said, "What happened? What did you see? How'd that go?" You know, I tried not to sound worried, but he said, "No, I don't know." He said, "You know, just kind of it passed." But he said, "I had like this. I woke up and I couldn't move." I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I used to get when I was a little kid." So it definitely runs in family. I'm just really kind of hoping my children don't have that. Because for me, it has not been a positive thing, I don't believe.
I know the feeling. My daughter has seen spirit literally since she was about 18 months old. And we were able to track that through putting her to bed, and, you know, all of a sudden she'd wake up and she would be cloud, pointing up. And it just kind of went from there. My stepdaughter, who is 13, she sees as well. She started seeing around 7 years old when she met the ghost in our house at the time. It was the gentleman who built our house. And she said, when we said, "Well, what did he say to you?" And she was like, "Well, he told me his name was Grandpa and that he was 85 years old." And we found out that his name was Gary and that he was 84 3 weeks before his 85th birthday when he passed away.
Wow.
So that was kind of interesting. But the little guy now, to watch him, it's kind of interesting. Oh, one other thing about my middle daughter, my stepdaughter. She actually, since we moved up north here, she has fairies in her bedroom every night. Every night, and literally sometimes if she just needs to go meditate and be in an alone state, if the weather is cooperating, she'll go out, and behind our yard we have a green belt that connects to the school. She'll actually go sit out in the green belt, and she'll just sit there, put her hands out, and the fairies will be all around her. And she says it's just an amazing experience when that happens. And they come in all colors within inches of her face. When we first moved up here, she was actually saying that the fairies, they wouldn't come through the window. And then all of a sudden, as it was like they got to know her and that the fairies all of a sudden realized that she could see them, all of a sudden they were like coming into her room. It's a very, very supernatural thing that she actually quite enjoys. So it is kind of fun. For her, at least. I don't see them.
Yeah, I've had a couple of people they've told me fairy stories, or stories, but encounters, reports of encounters, and and they generally describe it as being very pleasant and exciting, and not something to be frightened of, but. And that's good, because I find more people, I think, that tell me about these various encounters seem to feel a real sense of dread and upset. And maybe that's simply because they're encountering something that they've never experienced before. That's, things that are not supposed to exist. So, but... if that's a positive for her, if she feels good about it, then that's a good thing. I hope that stays a positive experience. It's just go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to get into gnomes here, because I figured no time like the present to get into those little pointy-headed bastards, absolutely, with the white beards. Do you think they're real?
Yes. I don't believe every single story I hear is necessarily a gnome. I think maybe there's definitely misidentifications of things that are probably just normal phenomena. Yeah. But Yeah, I think they're in every culture, going back thousands of years, back to recorded history. There's little people stories. And after I wrote an article a few years back about, it primarily started out as about my grandmother's experiences. My dad's folks were from Sweden. I didn't know my grandfather. He died really young. But my grandmother, my dad's mother, lived to 96, and she used to tell me about in Sweden they call them the tomten, and she'd tell me about the tomten or the tomtegubben. I think it's like little man or something. My Swedish isn't great. I just mostly know dirty words. But, and she said, the tomten would come around their farm, and they would take care of the animals, and then she said they'd see their little footprints, and they would always have to, make sure that they leave out some milk for the tomten, and on Christmas, and we actually used to do this. We'd have to, when my grandmother would be over, which was most Christmases, we would have to leave out some porridge or some oatmeal for it on Christmas Eve, because if you didn't do that, you risk getting the tomten angry. You didn't want to make them angry because they could be vindictive little guys, and they cause trouble. So I wrote an article about this, about my grandmother's stories of the tomten, and she was very serious about them. She didn't say they were stories. She said no, they were real. And I got a huge response to that. I had a lot of people that contacted me or left comments on the blog in the comments section about their stories, and I got them from all over the world. I've gotten some from Vietnam. I got one from Africa. I've got a lot of stories from people that said, "Oh, I had a gnome experience or a little person experience," and I have one I haven't even written about. Somebody that grew up locally. He was a janitor at the school that my wife was teaching at, and he and his brothers were terrorized by this small, squat, gnome-like being throughout their childhood. And he and his three brothers all shared a room, and so they used to barricade the door at night to try and keep this thing out. And so they would come up and, would sometimes be at their bedside, or they would move their stuff around. They would see things floating in the room, and all sorts of, it was, to him, a very terrifying experience. So, yeah, I've had really quite a response to that article, and a lot of people that have said that they've had these encounters. So, what do you make of them? I mean, do you say, well, this person is making this up, or there's something wrong with them, or I can't do that because I've had my own encounters with things, and I'm pretty sure I wasn't hallucinating, and I don't think I'm crazy. So, I'm hesitant to just dismiss these stories that I get from people. I mean, it doesn't seem fair for me to say, well, after all the strange things that I've seen and encountered, I'm going to turn around and tell somebody that they're making that up, or they're hallucinating. So, but yeah, I've had quite a few strange stories about these little people sightings.
What exactly do you think they are? Sorry, go ahead.
I know they seem to come in various forms too. Like, interesting what you said about that. Whatever it was, a wood nymph, or there seems to be different. But a lot of them, I hear, are like, the way they're reported, they sound very much like traditional gnomes in that gnome garb with the pointy hat. And so you wonder how much too is. Are they appearing that way because they're playing into the cultural perception? Are they taking that specific form? It just seems almost a little cliched that they have, would be wearing a pointy gnome hat, doesn't it? This, I don't know your thoughts on that, but it seems that it's odd that sometimes that often the reports I get are they seem like very stereotypical kind of gnomes, but then you get other kind of little small humanoid sightings like what you told me about.
Do you think there's a difference between the Native American or First Nations belief in the little people and what gnomes are? Do you think they're two different species whatsoever, or do you think they are as one?
There's definitely, I would say, there's a connection, but there may be different types, different species, if you will, or they could all be the same thing, just presenting themselves in different forms. I'm not sure about that. That's an idea that I've been kicking around, but I don't have any answers for that. I mean, it could be that there's been other writers a lot more well researched and lots more famous than I am that have come up with that have suggested that. You look at like Jacques Vallée or John Keel or guys like that really researched this and they seem to think that there is definitely an underlying connection between a lot of these sort of humanoid phenomena and what you might even a lot of the alien sightings too, a lot of what the ET encounters. Are they all basically the same thing, presenting themselves in whatever cultural context? We have these days we have these different alien abductions or ET sightings or grays, and then you also hundreds of years ago you had leprechauns. Or are they all basically the same thing, presenting themselves in different forms, or are they actually different sorts of beings?
That's the big question, is what are they?
Yeah.
Are they a supernatural creature? Are they a shapeshifter? Are they part of just legend and lore? Are people on too much OxyContin? These are questions that honestly need to be asked in regards to this. And we have about 4 minutes before we have to go to break here, John. But when people are citing these, are there any similarities in the sightings? Are they always near forests or waterways or on larger properties?
I have noticed something about rocks, and I read something about this at least once, maybe more than once, that a lot of them are the sightings near boulders or boulder fields or where there's a lot of rocks. Not sure what the connection is there, but I have found that a number of times in the reports that I've received. I had one from Africa. Guy said that he lived near this area where there was a lot of rocks or like a boulder field, and he said that they used to have these little beings that would come into their house at night. And interesting, it came from like Kenya or something. I have to look at it again. But yeah, that's one I've heard. But you seem to hear these things more in rural areas or out in the wilds. But then again, the one that the custodian at my wife's school, that was right near me in congested northeastern New Jersey. And it seemed to maybe something that was connected to the house itself. So, it wasn't something that this guy stumbled on or encountered out in the forest. It was something that was visiting him and his brother's repeatedly in their house. So again, that might be something. Some of these things could be beings that inhabit the woodlands, but then, in that case, it sounded like something that was almost more attached to that specific property, in which case you might think that it's possibly, some sort of entity, more of a supernatural entity as opposed to some sort of being that is, a cryptid, if you will.
And on that note, I'm going to get you to finish up here because we only got about 30 seconds left. We are talking with John Carlson tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Gnomes, missing time, aliens, Bigfoot. We are getting into all of it tonight on the mighty SOR. And if you're listening in on Twitter tonight, you know who you are. Lane, God of Thunder, Zombie Cupcake, and everybody else who's out there. Lulu Bell, keep it going. Having fun reading your tweets tonight. You're listening to Space Out Radio. We'll be back right after this.
Looking for news beyond the mainstream news? Head to spacedoutradio.com and check out the SOR Spacewire. This is Spaced Out Radio's Eric Markham, News Director for the SOR Spacewire. Daily, I will bring you intriguing stories and outlandish reports from what's going on around the world. UFO sightings, paranormal activity, conspiracies, alternative health, and so much more. And if you have news, email me at news@spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Had a run-in with ghosts, maybe Bigfoot, or seen lights in the sky? Hi, I'm Mike Schmidt from the SOR Sightlines. I'm here to investigate your sighting. Head to spacedoutradio.com and fill out a report on the Sightlines. All your information is 100% confidential, and I will help you figure out what you've been seeing. File your report, and let's find out the answers together.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Oh, there's only one way to rock. Loud and proud. In high definition. Radio 702 rocks. Las Vegas.
Have you ever had an extraterrestrial experience? One you just couldn't explain? Well, maybe I can help. Hello, I am Samantha Mullet. On the second Tuesday of each month, I will join Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio to bring a human aspect to ET contact. It's something I've lived with my entire life, and I'd love to help you understand. Let's share our experiences. The ET Experience, the second Tuesday of each month, only on Spaced Out Radio.
Hi there, this is Jolene with Revealette Reiki and Readings, and I want you to relax. Let me help you chill out and get in touch with your body, mind, and soul. In this busy world, sometimes we need to let go, and this is where I can help. Visit my website, revealetteR&R.wix.com/RevealetteR&R.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness. You can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Hi there, this is your psychic medium, Joanna, and I would love it if you would join us every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. With host James Tyson, we'll bring you personal psychic messages on two mediums and a large. Questions about love, life, career changes. We would love it if you would come and join us live. Call in and listen in for the experience. Allow us to open the doors to your other side. Two mediums and a large, heard only on Spaced Out Weekend at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
Do you have a topic or a guest that you'd like to hear on Spaced Out Radio? Let us know at spacedoutradio.com, where you can sign up to become a Space Traveler member today. Or you can find us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on our Facebook page, Spaced Out Radio Show. I know Gloria's liking that one. Welcome back tonight on Spaced Out Radio. We're having a lot of fun tonight. Hey, tomorrow night on the show, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com, we will be celebrating our second anniversary. Yes, 2 years ago, we fired this thing up called Spaced Out Radio. We've gone from about 10 to 12 listeners our first couple of episodes up to 25,000. And it's good to have you all along for the ride. Thank you for putting so much of your time and faith and energy into the mighty SOR. Tomorrow night, the anniversary show once again. If you're listening in on the United Public Radio Network live on 107.7 FM in New Orleans, we welcome you and the 160 countries around the world where you are to listening to us. Thank you for bringing us into your daytime, nighttime, morning time, wherever time you are in. We appreciate it. If you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Do us a favor. Go to freedomslips.com and donate today. We're still waiting for a Bill Cardwell password of the night. We will get to that hopefully in the next hour when the man, the myth, and the password legend arrives. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show on Instagram. I can be followed at Dave Scott SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download this show and others on iTunes, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. While there, we have some really cool features for you to check out, including the SOR Space Travelers Club and a heck of a lot more. Check it out today. Find something you like. Crank up the Bumblefoot. It's a good time. Tonight we are talking everything under the sun when it comes to the paranormal. The Paranormalist is with us, John Carlson. His website, theparanormalist.com. John, welcome back.
Thanks, Dave. Good to be here.
Well, it's good to have you along for it as well, my friend. You know, I'm enjoying this because I tell you, you should see how many gnome pictures are in the SOR Space Travelers Club on Facebook right now. It is horrible. These people are cruel, especially the one
tormenting you.
Oh, it's terrible, especially Ron from Saskatchewan. Now, if you've ever been to Saskatchewan, you can see the entire Canadian province from standing in one area because it's so flat. You can see the Yukon.
I got a friend that lives there. I haven't been.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said last night on the show, you never lose your dog because you'll be able to find it no problem. You know, so it's one of those things where, you know, they torture me. I know it's all in jest and all in fun, but Jesus, they're scary. You know, they even put up a picture of a gnome wearing the Borat bathing suit.
That's frightening.
Front and back. It's terrible. Terrible.
Right, that means they love you.
Oh, absolutely. And I adore them as well. I really do. Mm-hmm. Continuing on the gnome talk, you believe that this is a real creature. It lives around rocks. I know James Gilliland from the ECETI Ranch in Washington State, where he has everything from Bigfoot to aliens to UFOs on a daily basis there. And he says he even has gnomes on his property. Are they friendly little creatures? Or are they creatures of habit where they don't want interaction with people? What do you think it is?
The reports I've gotten mostly tend to be not very positive ones. Most people don't come away feeling that they were friendly or nice. I mean, some may just be more or less neutral, and you do get reports of people who kind of stumble across them, and they're in the woods going about their business, doing their thing, and people have sighted them. But I've had a lot of people that have contacted me that feel that they had a real sense of an evil presence when they're around them, and they've had a lot of they were very, very almost an unnatural fear reaction, like over-the-top fear reaction around them. And naturally, you know, if you saw something like that, you would be afraid. But I've had people that have said that they felt a real sense of evil, and that's not to say that they all are. Again, if we're dealing with something that could be of different sorts of species, that might not necessarily be the case with all of them, but. Yeah, I was contacted through my blog a couple of years ago by a woman who was featured on that. I think it was the Destination America show. I think it was Monsters and Mysteries. And I had actually watched, just before she contacted me, I had watched that episode. And she said, well, I was featured, and I read your article on that show. And she said, I read your article. And she said, they're definitely real. And she had this little man that was outside her house, you know, cackling and just scared her and her family half to death. I think they ultimately moved out of the house because of it. And she said they were just, you know, terrified of it, and it seemed to be encouraging that terror. So, you know, that's sort of the story that I've received a lot from people. So my feeling is they're probably not nice, but yeah, I don't want to generalize too much. I mean, I have heard other stories where people have, you know, cited them and haven't really had that sort of experience or that reaction to them. So again, we could be dealing with different types. It could be different types or species.
Do they really dress with the pointy hat, with the long white beards and the overalls? Is that how they're dressing, or is that just folklore?
You know, that's a lot of the reports I've received said that they had the stereotypical pointy hat and the white beard, and you know, it seems almost silly to hear that. You know, it seems like almost a cliche, but you know, yeah, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Are they presenting themselves in a way that is maybe familiar to us? Can they read us? Do they kind of understand where, you know, our cultural perceptions of what we think they should look like, and are they showing themselves that way, in that form? Yeah, that's I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a thought.
Now, when you look at this, is there a certain time of year where they're coming out, or are they seen at all times of the year?
I'm not sure. I hear, for the ones that sightings that have been outdoors, I think I've heard more in the summertime, but that's when people tend to be outdoors and camping and hiking more frequently. And again, it seems like they're often seen out of doors and out in the woods and in the wilds. But some I've received seem like they've have an attachment to a specific home. They come into people's houses, or they seem to live on the property or nearby. So I mean, that from if you were to believe that there could be a demonic connection, that would almost fall under like an infestation if you were going to look at it from that point of view. I don't know if it is a demonic phenomena at all, or if there's simply some sort of interdimensional being or something that is really basically a part of our Earth, of our planet, and a normal something that is like an Earth spirit, I suppose. So again, a lot more questions than answers. I wish I had any I get these stories and I try to sort of extrapolate different the facts from them, but you get one story, you may get a few similar ones, and then you get something else that completely contradicts the others. So
John,
it's hard to say. Yes.
John, I'm going to tell you why I hate gnomes, and they scare me. Mm-hmm. And I've told this story a couple of times on the show. I've never seen an actual gnome, okay? But what happened was, when I split up with my first wife, I had a basement suite, and my daughter had her bedroom there, and my landlords, where I was renting, had gnomes in their garden. And they just gave me the heebie-jeebies. I don't know why, they just did. Well, my daughter, knowing that she has seen things since she was a very young girl, okay, mm-hmm. She came up to me one day and she says, "Dad, I need to tell you something." She goes, "You know why I've been running into your room and sleeping in your room and not my bed is because I've heard tapping on my window lately." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And she goes, "It's gnomes." And long story short, and I'm paraphrasing here, what was happening was she was saying the street lamp would kind of glow into her window, and she would hear the tapping on the window in the middle of the night, and sometimes through the blinds, even though the blinds were closed, she would actually see the shadow of this garden gnome standing at her window. And then she would see it kind of, saunter off. And one time she went up to the window and she said she actually saw it running back towards the garden. And that's when she ran off and, "Well, I'm sleeping with Dad tonight because I'm a little scared." Yeah. You know how kids do that. So ever since then, I hated those gnomes. And they gave me the heebie-jeebies and the goosebumps. This is way before I had actually ever got into this type of phenomena on a full-time basis. So that is the reason why I can't stand these little bastards, okay?
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'm saying in regards to this, and I'm just throwing it out there because this is the type of topic we could talk about without embarrassment. Do you have a lot of people, or have you heard stories of these little ceramic garden gnomes coming to life?
That's a first for me. I have not heard that, but I had the one that turned into a cat. It went from a gnome to a cat, but no, that's very interesting.
So
now I'm gonna be freaked out when I see those things.
Well,
I'm not gonna get one from my garden. That's for sure.
Well, and my friend, it's one of those things where I don't know if it was her imagination or not. I'm going on her record that this little girl has seen ghosts since, well, she's not so little. She'll be 18 in January now, but she has seen ghosts since she was a little kid. Okay, so there is record of her seeing things and strange things happening around her.
Right.
That's why
Sure.
I give her the benefit of the doubt, because I want to be
Yeah,
that
I would.
open-minded parent. But whether or not it was actually the ceramic ones coming to life, or maybe there was a garden gnome in the area, because right by our area there was a fenced-off, little creek watered area where it was fenced off so the public couldn't get in there except the damn bear when he took the fence down. So there's a lot of things that happen in the area of British Columbia here if you're on the edge of wilderness. So that's why I'm wondering if maybe it was that, or maybe it was something like the ceramic ones coming to life. I have no idea.
Yeah. I think that would make me more nervous if the ceramic ones were coming to life. But yeah, maybe they attracted them. I don't know. The ceramic ones attracted whatever, this actual gnome creature might have been lurking nearby in the woods and drew it in there. I think that's also something that is something people should be careful of, is because symbology, you would look at something as seemingly kind of innocent and innocuous as a ceramic garden gnome, but could something like that be representative of something that is, I won't say necessarily evil, but of supernatural or paranormal, preternatural? And could that draw such things to your property, So you would think, ceramic garden gnome, what does that mean? It doesn't, it's just something silly little thing to stick in the garden, but could something like that draw forth, an actual entity? Just the way people might, hang certain symbols in their house, or even, play around with Ouija boards or tarot cards or that sort of thing. Can things like that draw in, entities? Wouldn't think, I've never even considered that with like a ceramic garden gnome, but I see some people have like those little gargoyles or demon-like things, and I never thought much of those, as being anything that was, potentially a negative or a thing to do. But yeah, now I think a little bit differently of that sort of thing, and yeah, it could be that's something that could have drawn this thing to you. That's one thought. But no, I would believe your daughter. I mean, certainly she seems like she had the history there. Since then, is she the one that had the fairy sightings too?
No, she actually had the ghosts in her room.
Okay.
Yeah, and where we actually took, when she had spirits in her room, we, my ex-wife and I, we rented a duplex with friends of ours. So our best friends were on one side, we were on the other. Really helped out with babysitting with a couple of young couples and everybody working. And our side of the duplex completely haunted. The other side, not a thing. And when we started noticing with my daughter, when she started picking things up a little bit more, it actually got to the point where, before every time we put her to bed, there would be cleanup time. Let's clean up the toys, clean up the room before we go to bed. Well, I would get up for work at like 7:15 in the morning, and help get ready for school or preschool or grandma's house or whatever was going on, and walk into her room at about 7:30 to wake her up, and her room was destroyed from toys everywhere. And we'd be like, what did you do in the middle of the night? She goes, nothing, I was sleeping. In that cute little kid voice, well, no, you made a mess. No, I did not. And she would actually get quite upset. And then what solved it for us, John, was one day my daughter was at grandma's house for night. and my ex-wife and I were sitting on the couch watching a movie. The dog is with us, and the 2 cats are downstairs with us, and my daughter had a squeaky door. And we heard her door squeak open, the pitter-patter of little feet running down the hallway, and then jumping on our bed. You know how kids use a bed like a trampoline?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we heard that going on, and we kind of looked at each other and said, "Oh my God, that's awfully weird."
Yeah.
And from then on, I was convinced that my daughter was telling the truth. So it's very interesting how things can happen like that, especially with kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Well, that's something that I've read in my studies over the last couple of years since the resurgence of this sort of stuff in my life. I've heard that a lot of times they are attracted to children. And, just like what I was saying earlier, when I first started to have those experiences when I was 4 years old, when we first moved into that house in Massachusetts, my brother I had just turned 4. His birthday's August also. He had just turned 18 and was getting ready to start at Boston College in September after Labor Day. And my sister was almost 16, and she was going into her junior year of college, of high school. So I was the only child in the family. And as far as I know, my brother and sister never experienced any of the things that I did in that house. But, again, they might have kind of attached themselves to me, and there seems to be a precedence in that from what I've read. I've read a lot about demonology, actually, in the last couple of years, and there definitely is a lot of documentation for that they do tend to sort of go towards children. So, that's again if we're dealing with something that's negative. I'm not married to this whole demon, negative spirit idea, but I think in some cases it is true. So, but your daughter's been okay. She hasn't had any kind of negative effects of all this?
You know what? She has, for a lot of kids who are intuitive, they do suffer from anxiety and depression. She has battled that, but she's a strong girl. She's getting straight A's in school in her grade 12 year, and she's just got to decide. She's deciding right now whether or not she wants to go to college right away or go do some traveling. I'm trying to suggest to her that she goes and does some traveling and see the world before she decides to settle down, pick a career, because that's something I've never done. I've never been out of North America, and I really think that it's time for her to do something along those lines, but she'll make that decision. I will not.
Good, but she's overall she's doing okay.
Yeah.
I can't say that I haven't had a terrible life at all, but it's something that I've dealt with throughout my life, and I sense this from a lot of people that I speak to and that have contacted me, that it's something that you're always dealing with on some level or another when you have these sorts of experiences.
Sure. I want to get to a couple questions here from our audience, if you don't mind. Gail is asking, why would someone be frightened of something so much smaller than regulation humans? And no, Dave, I'm not referring to you. I know you're not afraid. Actually, yes, I am. But, I think that's a good question, though. Why are people frightened by seeing one of these?
Yeah, you would think you could just punt it or something if it got out of line. But it's. I don't think it has anything to do with the size or the stature of these things. For one thing, I think if you saw something like that really defies, most people's sense of reality. Something like that's not supposed to exist. And if you were to see it, I'm sure that in and of itself would probably be quite frightening. But it's interesting that a lot of these sightings, it's almost the fear reaction that people get is almost sort of over the top. It's almost like they're more scared than they really even should be. So I don't know if that means that what these things actually are evil, and maybe they sense that there's a strong sense of dread when you see these things. If they truly are, evil or demonic in some way, entities, then, you get these disproportionate, fear responses. And I've heard that with some Bigfoot sightings, not all, but I've heard some people have a really, and that's a much larger being. So, it's more natural to be afraid of something that's 8 or 9 feet tall. But you get people that have these really tremendous fear reactions. Dave, do you know the Skinwalker Ranch story in Utah?
Yes.
You're probably familiar with that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you remember that there's one part where they talk about there are these blue orbs, like basketball-sized orbs that would sometimes sort of descend down onto their property and sort of hover near them, and they would get this incredible fear reaction. From blue floating orbs. There's nothing intrinsically frightening about that's weird. It might scare me just because they're blue floating orbs above my head, but they would, the people, the Gormans, I believe that's a pseudonym of the name of the family that owned the ranch, they would get this tremendous, overwhelming fear when they saw these things. So, that's an example of like something that shouldn't be that frightening, but they had this disproportionate sort of reaction to it. So, again, does that speak to these things being intrinsically evil? Is there something really that we're reacting to on almost a subconscious level? That we should be that frightened of something that's shouldn't be. If it's saw a gnome, you would think, oh well, that's maybe a little bit frightening and that's weird, but I think I would. Might also be sort of curious and want to see it a little bit closer, but not. But what you hear quite often is people are just terrified. So it doesn't make logical sense that you should be afraid of something that small.
Another question from Shar here. She is asking, have you ever heard of a short, like 2 feet tall, human-type creature with an evil face, big mouth, and teeth?
Well, I think some of the reports I've gotten, it's kind of a description that I've heard before. I don't know if specifically if there's a name for something like that in folklore, but
I don't know.
But yeah, I have.
I hope I don't run into it.
No, it's not something I'd like to see.
I hear you there.
But
let's get to.
Yeah, I've heard.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I've heard of kind of like big grinning mouths and and sometimes pointy teeth and things like that, and that's been described to me before. 2 feet's. They're vary in size too, from the things that people have told me. Some are smaller and some are larger. But what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to get to another question here from Bob.
Yeah. Sure.
And Bob is asking, I don't know how much you know about Dr. Stephen Greer, but apparently Dr. Greer has 2 samples of little creatures. Do you think those are legit?
Yeah, I think I've seen those before. Yeah, I don't know. I would have to read up on that again, but again, I'm not real quick to dismiss any of this. I know Greer is, he certainly seems to be a legitimate guy, and I know he's a big disclosure advocate, but I don't know. I would have to look into that. I know I've seen it before, but I would have to check that out.
let's move on. The man we call around here, we call him the crypto guru. His name's Ronald Murphy. He's a cryptid writer and a fairy folklorist out of Pennsylvania. And Ron does a show here the second Wednesday of every month. Great guy. He is just a very passionate speaker when it comes to the topics at hand, especially when it comes to the land of the Fae and, what he likes to call the goblin universe. Ron tends to think, and I'm curious on your opinion as we switch over to Bigfoot here, he tends to believe that somewhere down the chain that everything from gnomes to goblins to fairies are all connected to Bigfoot because they all seem to hover around that goblin universe. What would be your thoughts on that?
They're connected to Bigfoot?
Yes.
Or they're all related to, or...
In one way or another.
I think they're, my thoughts on the whole Bigfoot thing is there definitely seems to be some sort of paranormal aspect to them, but then again, there could be something that's more of a physical creature, and there could be something else that is more of a spiritual one. But yeah, I had my encounter a couple of years ago, I think was in a Bigfoot habituation area, and the things that I saw were not Bigfoot. And so there could be some merit to that idea. I mean, I don't know if what I saw was related at all to or had anything to do with the Bigfoot that I believe were in the area. But, if these sightings occur in specific locations or by people who maybe are sensitive to these sort of things, then they may be seeing, having Bigfoot sightings and seeing other entities besides that. So, besides the Bigfoot.
I think there are so many different relative terms towards the Bigfoot. I am just not very convinced that we are dealing with a hominid type creature or the North American great ape or whatever you want to call it. There are too many people having too many weird experiences around Sasquatch. I'm curious, have you ever had a Sasquatch experience?
My wife may have. I'll tell you that story quickly. My wife is a teacher, and each year she organizes, a class trip for the 7th grade. And they were going out to northwestern New Jersey. I live in the northeastern part, so straight out Route 80 west. If you're familiar with it, starts in Teaneck, New Jersey, which is pretty close to where I live, and if you follow it west, it goes straight up across to San Francisco, ends in San Francisco. So if you go out about 60 miles out 80, you run into Sussex County, and you're at that point pretty close to the Pennsylvania border. And it's a totally different New Jersey out there. It's more mountainous, a lot of woods. It's much more rural. And she would go out there, and they would take their 7th grade students out there to a camp in Stokes State Forest. And would be my wife and about a dozen other teachers and about 40 to 50 students. And they had cabins. So my wife and another teacher was staying in one of the girls' cabins. And middle of the night, one of the girls had an asthma attack, and their parents very cleverly neglected to write on the medical form that the girl had an asthma condition, and they did not pack her asthma medication. So this girl was having some serious difficulty. So my wife ran out to go to the medical office and wake up. There was a nurse on staff, and she went to go wake up the nurse and inform her that the student was having an asthma attack. And as she went out and was crossing the little compound area, she heard this horrible, like, screaming noise from the woods, and it was really loud and just unearthly, she said. And it sounded like human-like, didn't sound like an animal. And it kept going, it went on for quite a while. And soon everybody in the camp was up, from the commotion, and the ambulance arrived, and a state trooper and a forest ranger, came by, and they had to take this girl to the hospital. She was okay, ultimately. They got her medication she needed. But there was this screaming going on, and all the students and the teachers were up, and they were listening to this from the woods. And my wife also said she just heard some, real heavy footfalls from the woods nearby, and the screaming noise. And she said to the trooper and the forest ranger, said, what is that awful noise? And so they sort of looked at each other, and the trooper said, well, there's been some Bigfoot sightings in the area. And my wife said, oh, get out of here, Bigfoot. And he said, yeah. And she said, they were, and both the cop and the ranger were looked very serious. They were not joking around. It didn't seem to be. So she came home and told me this story, and then everybody had heard it. It was all the students and the teachers. Pretty much the whole camp was up at that point. And so she did not see anything, but the screaming went on for a while, and she heard these heavy footsteps as she was coming out and went out into the compound. So, at that point, I had an interest in Bigfoot, but I was not, I was not any kind of expert in it. I just as I have an interest in all things kind of strange and unknown. And I was like, yeah, Bigfoot, but I figured, they live in the Pacific Northwest and up there with you there in British Columbia. But I was like, New Jersey, that's ridiculous. There's no Bigfoot in New Jersey. So I, even though that is a very forested area, but it's New Jersey, so I didn't really take that too seriously, but I started to look into it and read up on it. And apparently out there in the western part of New Jersey, there's something called Big Red Eye, which I've never heard of. But if you live out that way, if you say Big Red Eye, everybody knows what you're talking about, because oftentimes there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings out there, and oftentimes they are described as having glowing red eyes, and so they're called Big Red Eye out there. So, but in my part of New Jersey, here outside of New York City, we don't know about that. I've never heard of it, and I don't think anybody I know has ever heard of it. But it's well known out that way. So, and I had actually, I like to go camping, and I like that area of New Jersey, and I've been out there, and I was talking to a ranger, and I said, so have you had any Big Red Eye sightings? And she said, and she laughed, and she goes, no, not recently, but she said, my father has. And she said, my father was a forest ranger for like 40 years. He just retired recently. And she said, he saw one of these things, and he and his partner, and it was like they took off running. So, yeah, so even in a state like New Jersey, I mean, they say that they're in every state of the union except of Hawaii, I think. But I guess that throughout North America and throughout the world, really. But from my experience, I was on a Bigfoot expedition in June of 2014, and we had some interesting experiences. Again, no clear sightings, but there was I got a very large footprint. I heard a lot of movement at night. It sounded like heavy footsteps, bipedal walking. I saw some movement between the trees. It was very bright moonlit night, the 4 nights that we were there. Actually, the last night it was a full moon, and the trees in the forest to the left was backlit, and I saw a couple of times like silhouettes moving between the trees. So that was an interesting experience, but nothing really clear. Nothing other than the silhouettes and the footprint and some fingerprints that I saw, which were very, very large.
The one thing that is the biggest debate that I feel around Sasquatch is whether or not this is a live creature or whether or not there's something supernatural about it. A lot of the researchers who go out there and people who've been researching a long time like to take the scientific approach to it, that there's no way in hell that it could be supernatural. But if you look at a lot of the First Nation / American Indian stories, they talk of this creature being able to shapeshift or maybe move interdimensionally. And yet a lot of the researchers absolutely dismiss that before even checking out the possibility. Which way do you lean on that, number one? And number two, do you think we're being too narrow-minded when we're trying to prove or disprove the existence of this creature?
I think maybe we are. I mean, I'm lean toward it having some sort of supernatural aspect to it. That's not to say that it's not a physical creature. It apparently leaves footprints, and a lot of the footprint evidence seems like it would be awfully difficult to, if not impossible, to fake. I mean, when I was out west 2 years ago, the first weekend we were up at the Olympic project that's run by Derek Randalls and up in the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. And there was some of these footprints were, they didn't look like they were made from any kind of cutout, board or something like that that you would strap on your feet. They looked, and Dr. Jeff Meldrum was there, and he gave a talk and displayed some of these footprints. And so, there's certainly anatomical features that would be really, really difficult to fake. So, there definitely seems to be a physical aspect, and a lot of the people that have had sightings and encounters describe a very physical being. But then you always have a certain number of them that also have these other kinds of more paranormal experiences associated with these sightings. The guy that I went with, who invited me out there to Washington and Oregon, is my friend Adam Davis, who's a cryptozoologist, pretty well-known guy, and he is. And we went. I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. It's like, so we were at that Olympic project weekend, and those guys are very much all about scientific evidence, and they really did not want to hear anything that is suggestive of anything other than the fact that they're purely an undiscovered species of animal or some sort of proto-human. But then we went to a different area with another researcher who's very much of the mind that these things do have some sort of supernatural powers or something. So, that sort of thing. So, there's definitely two different schools of thought, but no, I would think, the point I was going to make is, one of the researchers that my friend was in touch with, pretty well-known guy in that Bigfoot community, he told him that he said he had a UFO sighting in conjunction with a Bigfoot sighting. He saw a Bigfoot and he saw a UFO right above it or nearby it. And he said, "Look, I'm not going to bring this up because people won't take me seriously as a researcher if I mention this." So he said, don't tell anybody about it. So there's definitely sort of a stigma to attached to suggesting that there's any kind of paranormal aspect to Bigfoot. And a lot of the people who are more interested in gathering scientific evidence, they don't want to hear that. And understandably, I mean, Bigfoot's a difficult enough topic without bringing into it that they're possibly, magical on top of it. I understand why, these people are reluctant to talk about that or even to accept it as being real. But there's a lot of these reports that there are, telepathic communication supposedly, or, you hear about orbs of light or them disappearing or reappearing or, so there's a lot of those sort of stories that go along with Bigfoot sighting. So it's I don't think those can be dismissed. And I tend to believe in a lot of the Native American legends. I think we're so focused on science that I think we tend to dismiss anything that does not fit into that scientific paradigm.
And that's the tough part, because for a lot of people, they just can't bring that type of thought to their brain. They just can't include it because we are so based on a scientific method in society that we can't think that there could be something more to this in the end of it all. Yet the way I look at it is that seems a little narrow-minded, considering the creature hasn't been proven it exists, even though I personally think it does, because I've seen two. My wife has seen one. Okay, and we've had many other people have sightings as well. But the main thing is, until we can prove that it's actually alive to figure out what it truly is, I think that it's being a little narrow-minded. And maybe that's my opinion. Maybe I'm on the lower end of the scale when it comes to making that assumption. But do you feel then, John, that considering we don't have a body, we don't have any bones, we don't have any teeth, we do have scat, hair samples, we do have footprints that have been casted, amongst other things, do you think that we're dealing with a creature that is of intelligence or not? Because it isn't the reigning hide-and-seek champion for no reason.
Yeah. Well, if they're a purely physical species, and there's nothing interdimensional or supernatural about them, then they are extremely elusive, which would indicate that they're probably very, very intelligent. I understand it in an area like British Columbia where there's so much forest and woodland and mountains, that something like that, if they're few and far between, could hide themselves. But when you hear about them in places like where I live, and the northeastern states, and you wonder where could something like that, where could they, if it's a species, where could they be living? Where could they be hiding themselves around here? Not that there's not a fair amount of woods. I live a couple hours north of the Pine Barrens, which is about over 1 million acres of forest. But nevertheless, you're talking about some very large creatures. So you would think that maybe they don't occupy our plane of existence entirely. Maybe they spend some time here, but maybe when they go to die or maybe they can traverse different dimensions. I don't know. But you certainly. I had somebody contacted me just the other day regarding a kind of a supernatural experience. This happened out in northwestern New Jersey, not too far from where my wife had her experience. A woman said she was when she was a teenager. She was at her friend's house, and her friend's father was taking her home, but there was a heavy snowstorm, and he had to let her out of the car and make her walk the last leg of it, the last couple miles home, because he couldn't drive any further on the road. And so she was walking alone along these woods, and she had the sighting of, this little big, hairy, upright, creature walking kind of parallel to her across the road at the edge of the woods. And she said she had a very clear message in her head that, said, leave me alone. Don't. So I won't bother you if you don't bother me. I see you and I know you see me. Just keep walking and don't bother me. And it was like this very clear message that she heard in her head. And this thing just kept walking. She said it was very tall and muscular and athletic, and it took these big, big strides. And, after a few moments, it was out of range and, turned into the woods, and that was all that she saw of it. But again, there was this kind of sort of, telepathic communication supposedly that was happening. So you hear a lot of that as well. I've had a lot of people tell me that sort of thing, that they've had some sort of, unspoken communication with them. So, and then I've also heard of disappearing and reappearing, or cloaking, I think that's what it's called in some circles. So,
are you buying the whole telepathy thing? And we got about 4 minutes left before we got to go to break. But are you buying the whole telepathic communication?
Well, I suppose if you're open to the idea that there's something more to these things than being just some animal species or some sort of primitive human, relic hominid, then yeah, I suppose you have to consider that as a possibility if they possess those kind of abilities. I suppose, but I haven't personally had that kind of experience. But I've had a number of people tell me that. But then you have quite a few that just say, I saw it. It was a large and muscular and hairy, and kind of looked semi-ape, semi-human. And they describe a purely physical creature with no sort of supernatural aspect to the encounter. So I don't blame those people for rejecting the idea that they might be something more than just a species, but an undiscovered species. But my friend, my cryptozoologist friend, has been going out. He just moved to Southern California, and he's been going out with one of the First Nations people. And he said what this guy has been telling him is that he believes that, according to, at least in their tribe, that they believe that there is a Bigfoot creature, an actual physical creature, and then there's one that's more of a spirit. So there's two different things out there. One is more spiritual, more of a supernatural being, or preternatural, and the other is more of a just a regular physical being. But I guess some of those theories, I'm not an expert on all the Native American lore concerning Bigfoot, but I suppose there's different thoughts on that. But I thought that was interesting, that there may be something that is an actual Bigfoot creature, and then there's something that maybe more of a spirit, or something that even could be trying to pass themselves off as Bigfoot.
It's very interesting because I've never heard that theory before, that there's not only the spiritual type, but the physical type as well. I thought they were all as one. That's a totally different theory to throw right into the mix of everything as well. We got about 45 seconds left with you here. Okay. So we're going to hold off on the rest of it. But Bigfoot definitely exists, and we're going to get into an experience in the next hour, a couple of experiences of yours. We're going to get into missing time, and then what happened to you and your friends when you were trekking out in the wilderness in Oregon. I got to hear that story again. This story will give you just the heebie-jeebies. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. We are with John Carlson, the paranormalist. We are through 2 hours. We're going into hour number 3 right after this, so make sure you stick on by, tune on in. And don't forget, tomorrow night on the show, it is the 2-year anniversary show of Spaced Out Radio. We hope you take the time to join us as well. We'll be right back after this.
The SOR Sightlines is a place for you to find answers to your strange experiences. Hi there, this is Mike Schmidt. If you have had an encounter with ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, ETs, or anything else that doesn't make sense, head to spacedoutradio.com and file a Sightlines report. All information you give is 100% confidential, and I will personally help you find the answers you need. SOR Sightlines, your answers are a click away.
Greetings and salutations, space travelers, from the Chronicles of the Unknown team.
What is Chronicles of the Unknown? I keep hearing about this thing.
It's a new paranormal reality TV show based right here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Follow our team as we uncover claims of activity on the Caribou Gold Rush Trail. You can also follow us here every third Monday, where 2 members of our team will be available to answer your questions. We'll give you some equipment updates and some of our experiences on the road, right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with the UFOR On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 mediums and a large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
Have you checked out the SOR Spacewire at spacedoutradio.com yet? Every day we post the latest stories regarding the weird, strange, and completely unbelievable. From cryptid and UFO sightings to the conspiracy world, we tackle it all. Hi there, I'm Eric Markham, Spaced Out Radio's news director for the SOR Spacewire. And if you have a story, I want to hear it. Email me at news@spacedoutradio.com.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Every month on Spaced Out Radio, we look into the deep and dark reports of cryptids roaming around the world with me, Rob Morphy, from Cryptopia.us. I would love it if you would join me and host Dave Scott as we delve into the most arcane stories and reports regarding creatures of the unknown. My job is to hunt down the details and bring the evidence forward to you. These aren't your regular Bigfoot stories I'm talking about either. You can find out more about crypto history at spacedoutradio.com.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to connect with us on Spaced Out Radio? Head to spacedoutradio.com to check out the latest shows, guests, and sponsors. And don't forget to sign up for the Space Travelers Club. You'll find all you need at spacedoutradio.com. Welcome back to the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Good to have you along for the ride. We do appreciate it. Tomorrow night on the show, we're going to have a little bit of a birthday party around these parts. Yes, Spaced Out Radio turns 2 tomorrow. It was back on this day, on November 30th, 2014, that we launched the mighty SOR, and we've had some good things happen along with that. So I hope you stick around, help wish us a happy birthday. We're going to have some fun tomorrow night. I'll be joined by James Tyson, Johnny Enoch, and a few other special guests that you've heard on this show along the way. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to thank everyone listening in on the United Public Radio Network live on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 160 countries around the world. Thank you so much for allowing us to be part of your daytime or nighttime. Thank you for tuning in. If you're listening in on Revolution Radio, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. We need some donation dollars here. Go to freedomslips.com and donate today. We have no Bill Cardwell tonight, which means we don't have a password. This is a rarity in these parts. We're not even going to make one up because we're pouting. So if you're an SOR space traveler waiting for the password, well, you'll have to wait until tomorrow night. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show on Instagram. I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download this show and others on iTunes. And our website is spacedoutradio.com. While there, you can check out some really cool features. Our great music by our resident guitar god, Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses. And read up on some blogs, Newswire, and join the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month as well. We are talking with John Carlson tonight. He calls himself the Paranormalist, and his website, theparanormalist.com. We're talking everything cryptid. John, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Dave.
Good to have you for the full ride here, my friend. It's always a good time. Always a good time.
I'm having fun.
I'm glad. I want to get into missing time. Because a lot of people have had time skip on them. I'm one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was weird. It happened at the same intersection in Vancouver, once when I was heading west, once when I was heading east, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. Literally, I watched the light turn green. I go to hit my gas pedal, and I look up, and I hear horns honking, and the light is red. Twice that happened to me. At the same intersection. Don't know what happened. Really don't know.
Wow.
And missing time, though, it's a different thing. We usually associate it with some sort of alien connection or abduction. What do you think missing time is?
I think it seems to be a subset of what I've just been calling like time anomalies. There's, like you said, there's time skips, there's missing time. Missing time is what I get the most reports about, but I get others where people seem to jump ahead in time, or there's like these time slips like what you've experienced. But missing time, when I have some personal experience with that. I had a missing time incident of my own when I was maybe 14 or 15, 14 and a half, walking home from my junior high school, and I was walking home the same way I walked every day, and it was mostly like one long road for about a mile and a half, and then there were two quick turns, and I was at my house. So it was pretty much a straight line for 98% of the trip, and then there was like a couple of turns, and I was home. So no way I could have gotten lost. It was just one long straight road, and I walked it every day. And as I approached the intersection, I started, first of all, everything seemed strangely kind of quiet and hushed. I've had other people describe the same thing. And this part is, I think, unique to my experience. I haven't had anybody else tell me this, but as I was approaching the intersection, I saw the familiar sights. There was a traffic light, and there was a couple of stores on the corner. And as I was walking toward it, it appeared to be these objects. You walk towards something, normally the objects appear to get larger. They seemed to be receding into the distance as I was walking forward. And then I don't remember anything at that point. And I found myself on my feet walking, but in another part of town, a couple of miles away. And I had no idea how I got there. And I'm not sure the amount of time that passed. It might have been 20 minutes. It might have been as much as an hour. But I didn't know I knew where I was. I didn't end up in another state or anything, but I was still in my town, but in a completely different part. And the interesting thing too was I was still walking due south, but I was north of the point of where I started. So it wasn't even as if I somehow lost my train of thought and maybe U-turned, in which case I would have been walking north. I was walking south just as I was, but I was actually north of the point where I started of my school. And, you know, I had this, to make the whole thing that much stranger, my mother, you know, going back to my mother, she showed up in her car. She pulled up right where I was, and how she knew that I was over there, you know, I didn't know. And I asked her that. I said, "How did you know I was over here?" And she said, "I don't know." She said, "I just heard a voice in my head said, 'Go get John. He needs you.'" So she was just at home, you know, puttering around the house, and she just said she heard a voice that said, "Go get John. He needs you." And she said, "I just knew where you were." But, you know, she pulled up and she swung open the car door and she said, "Are you okay?" So she was very, you know, she knew there was something that happened, but she didn't know what. And, but this was in the day that it was sometime after 3:00 in the afternoon. I mean, I think I left right after class, as I recall. If I had left a little bit late, it wasn't too terribly late. I didn't really, do anything after school. I typically just went home. Wasn't somebody that did a lot of sports or anything in school. I just or were in any activities. Usually the bell rang and I was out the door. So I had this experience, and it's bothered me ever since I had it, and it's something I've always thought about. And so I tried to find out more about it. So the only information I could find, this is pre-internet, and I found some books by Bud Hopkins, and who was kind of a major figure in this alien abduction phenomena, and he had written a book called Missing Time. So I found that. I said, oh, maybe this might explain my experience. But all those, he did Missing Time, and what was his other one? I forgot the name of the other book. He wrote several, and then I started reading some by Dr. David Jacobs, who has done a lot of hypnotic regressions. He was actually kind of mentored, I think, a bit by Bud Hopkins. But these were all related to, the alien abduction phenomena, and which typically were either people were visited at their bedside by these gray aliens, or they were, driving in some remote area at night, and they saw a light, or there was a UFO sighting or something. I didn't have anything like that at all. It was daylight. It was in a busy, congested area. There was the high school. There was a junior high school, the high school, and there was the elementary school that I went to, all in the immediate area. And it was like around 3:00. It was normally a time where a lot of kids were getting out of school, and there were, parents picking up their children at the elementary school. And it was a busy time of the day with all the three schools around. But it was strangely quiet that day, and it was broad daylight, and I didn't have any kind of UFO sighting or anything like that. So I'm reading these books and about the alien abduction, and I'm like, well, that doesn't really fit, what happened to me. I mean, this was broad daylight in a busy suburb, and at a busy time of the day. So I wrote about this, and I have had a huge response to this article. I've had so many people leave comments with their own stories in the comment section of the post, and then I've had a lot of emails from people, and a lot of different types of stories, but many of them very, very similar to mine. Broad daylight, and they suddenly found themselves someplace else and with no memory. Sometimes there's been several hours of missing time. Sometimes it's only, a few seconds or a few minutes. I've had one as long as somebody told me they were gone for 3 days. They said they went outside to into their yard to smoke a cigarette, and then they came back what they thought was a few minutes later, and their family was in a panic, and they said, we've called the police and we've been looking for you for the last 3 days. But that's unusual. I mean, it's normally anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours. But a lot of them are, they don't fit that sort of alien abduction phenomena that, Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs have written about. So, I mean, it's a puzzling phenomena. I mean, it seems to, if there is some sort of intelligence that is behind this, that is taking people for whatever purposes, they must have the ability to stop time or something like that, because it seems like they can get to you wherever you are. But they're not always like late at night, or they come into your bedroom while you're, at 3 a.m. or when you're driving down some dark country road or anything like that. It seems like they happen pretty much everywhere at any time. So it's a strange phenomena, and it seems to be all over the place.
Do you think it might have something to do with some sort of mind control that is going on, that maybe all of a sudden there's a certain signal that people are hearing and they just kind of tune out for a couple of seconds, and that's what it could be?
Yeah, it's not something that I've considered. Mind control by some kind of otherworldly intelligences, or by the government, or
either or.
Yeah,
there is possibility.
It could be. It's interesting though. Sometimes people are there. There's no relocation, geographic relocation. Sometimes they're in their house, and then I've had this story a number of times. Somebody tells me I was doing cooking breakfast or vacuuming in the morning, and then I looked outside and it was dark, and like the whole day went by and I don't know what happened, and that sort of thing. And sometimes, but they're still in the same area. They haven't gone anywhere. But then they've got some of these things where, like my experience, I was relocated. How I got over where I was, maybe I walked in some sort of, fugue state. I stumbled over to, this other part of town. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's a possibility. It could have been some sort of, something could have induced some sort of trance, and I could have just walked over to where I was.
Do you think then, John, that it might have something to do with the idea that maybe we just enter these portals or vortexes that absolutely take that time away?
Yeah, I have considered that. It could be that, stumbled into some sort of, some portal into some other dimension and came out the other side. But again, it's a lot of these people that have these experiences are, they've had them multiple times. I think I had one other when I was younger. It's difficult to remember, but I think it happened to me once before. And actually, my brother and sister were with me, and my sister brought this up to me a few years ago, and I had never said anything to either her or my brother. And being older, they had taken, my brother, I guess, was in college, and my sister, I think, had maybe just graduated high school, and they took me on a camping trip, and we were I think we were out in the Berkshires in western Massachusetts, and I had this very strange feeling that, well, I remember everything very, very clearly when we first got there. I remember the color of our tent. I remember my brother asking me to clear away the leaves so we can put down our tent. You know, he's giving me something to do, keep me busy, and I remember finding these little kind of pinkish orange salamanders and being excited about that. And then I remember, I don't know, I have a vague memory of seeing some beings coming out through the woods, and I remember thinking, well, that's the end of our camping trip. And then I don't remember a thing after that. And my sister brought this up to me a couple of years ago. She said, you remember that camping trip? And I said, yeah. And I knew what she was talking about. And she said, I only remember the first half of it or shortly after we got there. And she said, I always felt like something weird happened. So I said, okay, so this is not entirely in my imagination because it was so long ago. I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. So, I mean, you look back at some of these experiences and you think, well, maybe I'm just imagining it or something in my, it was something I dreamt but that's something that always troubled me. It always kind of stuck in my mind. And then my sister brought it up. And I said, oh, okay, so maybe this isn't entirely something that I've fabricated in my head, in my brain. So it seems that these experiences are often repeated. And I wouldn't be surprised if I had this more than just those 2 times. But those are the 2 times that I can recall consciously, and specifically the one when I was a little bit older and my mother found me. So again, it goes back to being a sort of a pattern. These are rarely seem to be just isolated incidents. So if it were something like where I stumbled into some sort of portal or gateway, it wouldn't seem like it was something that would happen repeatedly. There's a good book out by Jenny Randles called Time Storms, and she postulates that this could be more of a physical phenomena, almost like a storm, like a freak storm or a hurricane or a tornado that suddenly whips up, unexpectedly. And she said a lot of times they're associated with these kind of mists. People will drive into these mists, or this suddenly mist will surround them, and then there's this period of missing time. But she equates it to like a physical phenomena, which is interesting, and it's a very good book and very well documented. But how does that explain people that have this happen to them repeatedly? If it's something that happens to you more than once, that would almost be like getting hit multiple times by lightning. It seems really unlikely that it would happen or would follow a person to different areas and different locations. So I think it has something to do with the individual. Again, these people who I guess are experiencers, which I suppose that I am, and sounds like you are and your family are. So I think it's something more to do with the individual, and not to say that it's entirely happening within our own minds, and that, but maybe that we're predisposed to, whatever these forces are that seem to be at play, and I think I feel are probably affecting most people to some degree or another, I believe some people maybe are more aware of it than others, but I think it has something more to do with the individual than it being some sort of random event like stumbling into a portal or experiencing some sort of like time, a storm or some sort of anomaly like that, the random anomaly. It wouldn't happen multiple times to a person if it was just a random event. That's my feeling.
Do you think it might be something along the lines of like a sleep apnea where literally you can die during the night when you stop breathing and then your body kicks itself back into working and the heart starts working again and pumping and getting things going? Do you think it might be that these people are suffering some sort of apnea of some sort?
Actually, an actual physical condition, or
yeah, that's just making them all of a sudden just lose it, like lose track of time for a couple of minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it may be.
Yeah. I mean, it could be some sort of physical condition of the brain or of the body. You know, I don't discount that sort of thing. Again, you know, I'm not an extremist with the paranormal stuff. I mean, I have a lifelong interest in this kind of thing, but I don't jump right to the conclusion that everything is paranormal. You know, so, you know, maybe it is some kind of, you know, physical illness or condition that people are suffering from that causes a blacking out of and maybe they simply don't remember where they are. But some of the stories are very strange. So and you know, it's hard to fit that into some of them into it being a physical condition. I've had a number of stories that are of people who are driving and they've covered an enormous amount of distance in a ridiculously short period of time. Like, you know, a lady that drove from, I don't know, Kentucky to southern Florida or something like that. She was on a spring break and she went down to visit some boy that she had, you know, gotten, you know, sort of was starting to date in college, and she went down with a friend, and on her way back, she had this, you know, one of these strange feelings, and her friend kind of zoned out who was driving with her, and then she didn't remember, and then she completely blacked out herself. And that's always interesting too. A lot of these are not just one individual person. Very often there's more than one, there's two people or more that are present. So, you know, how do you explain that too, where another person is similarly affected, you know? So in this particular case, like the woman, her friend sort of zoned out, like she was trying to wake her and pushing her, and she was just unresponsive, and then she blacked out herself. So you get these a lot of times where the person is almost like they're switched off, the other person. And then she found herself home like 2 hours later. I mean, they covered something like 400 miles or something like that. So, I mean, unless she was driving like 200 miles an hour, there's no way she would have been there. But it was like 2 hours later. She was very sure of the time that they left. She, you know, and she said a couple hours later she was home, you know. And I've actually had quite a few of those type of stories, very similar to that, where somebody was driving and they lost memory, and they found that they had covered an enormous distance in, you know, crazy short amount of time. So, and I've had a lot of these where there have been other people involved, sometimes multiple people. So, again, that's, you know, if it's somebody that has a physical condition, how is that affecting the people that are with them, you know? So it almost seems like there's got to be some sort of a manipulation of some kind of somebody, I don't know, another intelligence, whether it's the government is messing with something or the lab. But yeah, I don't want to delve into the conspiracy theory stuff too much, but you know, or if it's aliens, if you want to use. I'm very hesitant to go there with the whole alien abduction thing, just because of the connotation with that. You know, people hear that and they immediately kind of get turned off by that. But whatever this is that seems to be interacting with people, and I think there is something that seems to be have an interest in the human race, and that has been interacting with us for a long period of time. It almost seems like whatever this phenomena is, it seems as if it's intelligently directed to me. That's the only thing that I can, that I can determine at this point that I think I believe. I mean, it would be a lot more easy to live with if it was simply like some sort of physical condition, but it just, there's too many exceptions to that.
I always find it interesting when it comes down to the whole missing time thing, how people are just stunned because they absolutely know that something has happened, but it's like walking around in a daze when you just wake up and let's say someone moved your bed outside and you're wondering how your bed got outside. Like they're just wandering around trying to figure out what the hell is going on. It's almost like a zombie-like feeling there for a moment, isn't it?
Yeah. This is similar. Just from my personal experience, when I was walking home, that's normally was a very busy time of the day. This is going back 30, close to 40 years. 30, that was late 1970s. And so I don't think I stayed after school. But if I did, I don't know, it wouldn't have been for very long. Like I said, I didn't care for junior high a whole lot. So I didn't really, as soon as that bell rang, I was usually out of there. That was kind of like a rough 3 years for me. And I didn't stay after for much unless I had to see a teacher maybe about homework. But I think I left right after the bell rang like I usually did. But it was oddly quiet. It was normally a very busy time. Like I said, there was the junior high, there's the high school, and the elementary school, all very close to each other, and they all got out around the same time. And it was quiet. It was very hushed, and almost kind of like the volume had been turned down. It was hard to describe, but it was very almost like the world was sort of muted, and maybe this is something that was going on in my own brain. But then as I was walking, I had this very kind of unreal sensation, and then as I was approaching that intersection, like the familiar objects, the traffic light and the stores on the corner were getting smaller as I was walking toward them. They were like receding into the distance, and then I don't remember anything except that then I found myself walking sometime later in another part of town. So, maybe it's something, and then again, my mother knew exactly where it was. So I don't know if that was just my mother's, her being an intuitive person, knew that I was in trouble, but she always said she heard a voice said, "Get John, he needs you." And she just knew exactly where I was. And my mother, this was the 70s, if I was late, as long as I came home for dinner, we didn't have cell phones, and parents didn't track their kids night and day the way they do now. They, as long as I showed up for dinner, my parents didn't really worry about me. They assumed that I stayed after school or for something, or I was at a friend's house, or, she didn't normally come looking for me, but she knew exactly where I was. So that adds sort of an added, dimension to the strangeness of it that she knew. So again, a lot of times there is some other involvement by another person, which is which adds to the validity of it, I think. Anytime somebody says, "Well, I had this experience and I was completely alone," well, then you might say, "Well, that's something that is, you were imagining, is in your, is entirely in your mind." But when there's other people involved, or there's corroboration, it makes it more difficult to dismiss.
One final question on this before we move on. Do you think it has maybe anything to do with a skip in time travel, maybe backwards or forwards in time?
Well, yeah, that's definitely part of these time anomalies, that sometimes there are skips. So it could be something, like something to do with the nature of time itself. It might not necessarily be the individual, but then I imagine other people would be experiencing the same thing, not just a specific person, but yeah, I mean, it could have something to do with, I don't know, how much do we know about the nature of time? You hear about these things. And I had another story from a woman who apparently went back in time. She was visiting. She was a lady from Virginia, but her and her husband liked to visit northern England and Ireland and Scotland. And I think this happened in Scotland. And she got off at this train station, and she went to this village, and it apparently was in some other era of time, like maybe 100 years earlier. And there were some buildings there, I think, that were no longer existed, and she saw some people dressed in sort of old-fashioned garb, and so did she somehow stumble into some time warp or something like that? Or again, is it something that is an actual condition of the universe or of our planet, or is it something to do with the individual? Because this is a woman that also had some other odd experiences. Actually, I have 2 stories on my blog about her. She had another missing time experience up in one of those megalithic, Bronze Age megalithic structures up in England. So she had more than one odd experience. So again, she seems to point to the fact that she's more of that it might have more to do with the individual than it being, some sort of just natural anomaly, a temporal anomaly. But what it is, I don't know.
My friend, you have a great story about a trip to Oregon that you mentioned to me previous to us coming on the air tonight. And we got about 20 minutes, if that, left in the show. I need my audience to hear this story, because this is absolutely a phenomenal, phenomenal case of I don't know what the hell you were looking at.
Yeah. I have to get a beer for this one. It's kind of a tough story to talk about. I have been talking about it a little bit. It was, I guess I'll try and start at the beginning. I have a friend of mine, when I had my podcast several years back, I did a podcast on, I had got to be friends with a guy that lived in my neighborhood who had a similar interest in this kind of strange stuff. And we decided to start a podcast, and we were always looking for guests. So I used to go on, I still look at anomalist.com, and the guy that runs that, Patrick Huige, has a publishing company called Anomalist Press. And we interviewed a lot of his authors, and I read about this guy, Adam Davis from England, and he had written a book called Extreme Expeditions, and I read the book, and it was very, very entertaining, and I really enjoyed it, and he sounded like an interesting guy, so we called him, and I booked him on the show, and we interviewed him, and it was a lot of fun. We used to like to have fun on the show. We used to joke around a little bit, and Adam has a great sense of humor, and we got on really well. So we interviewed him several times on the show, and then after my co-host moved away and the show kind of went by the wayside, Adam and I kept in touch, and we would email and, then started, and we would Skype each other regularly, and we still do, talk every week or two. And he was, he's a cryptozoologist, and probably a lot of the audience listening knows of Adam. He's pretty well known in the field, and he's done a lot. He's been on Finding Bigfoot when they went to Sumatra. He has done a lot of research there. And so Adam and I became, he's been on a lot of shows. He was just on the Josh Gates show when they're looking for they went on looking for the Yeti, Expedition Unknown. And so Adam and I became friends, and he's been all over the place looking for different sort of cryptids, but he had only around a few years ago started to get interested in looking into Bigfoot. He had never really done that before. So he went out with a bunch of his friends, most of them from England, one guy from the Netherlands. They went out to north to Washington State. And he said, look, we're going to be out there on the way back. We're going to stop over in New York City for a few days. And like, why don't you come in and, we'll hang out with us. So, it's New York City is like a 20-minute bus ride from my house. So I went in there and I met up with him, and we hung out stayed at a hotel in the city for a couple of days and hung out with him and his friends. And so Adam and I finally got to meet face to face, and we had a great time. And he said, look, you should come out next time we go on an expedition. You should come with us. And I said, oh, that sounds fun. I've written about this stuff often and often, interviewed people who do this, but I've never actually done it, been out in the field. So I said, yeah, that sounds cool. I'd like to do that. So, we talked about it for a while, and then around, winter of the following year, he said, look, I'm going to do another Bigfoot expedition. I'm going to go to Washington State and then down to Southern Oregon. Why don't you come with me? I said, okay, sounds good, and I'll do that, So I booked the flight, and I met him in Seattle-Tacoma Airport, and we went up, this is June of 2014, and we went up to Derek Randall's, a well-known Bigfoot researcher, runs this Olympic project on the Olympic Peninsula in Port Angeles, Washington. And we went up to his weekend, and there were a lot of Bigfoot dignitaries there. And there's Dr. Jeff Meldrum was there and gave a talk, and met a lot of nice folks. And these people all very much I guess in the Bigfoot field they call them apers. They're people that really believe in just gathering scientific evidence, trying to get proof, and that Bigfoot is purely a physical, undiscovered species. Nothing paranormal, supernatural about them. And that was mostly the crowd, I think. I mean, if anybody disagreed with that, they weren't saying so, because there was a lot of talk about people who believed in that sort of thing, and it's pretty much negative. So but very nice people. We had an interesting experience one night. The first night we went out on a little walk up the Olympic Trail, and we definitely caught some movement and heard a grunt and a similar call further up the road, and it was interesting. I mean, we didn't see anything clearly, but so we were there for a couple of days, and then we left a day early, actually, and we were Adam had been in touch with this other researcher, a guy who really takes the absolute direct opposite approach as to what these guys at the Olympic Project do. This guy, Dr. Matt Johnson, and I know probably the audience has heard of Dr. J. And what it interested Adam in this in going to see Dr. Johnson was that he had some audio of Bigfoot vocalizations on his this place where he was. He's the person that does the habituation method. So what he does is he stakes out a specific location. And he goes there each time, and in an attempt to kind of gain the trust of the Bigfoot and get them to communicate with him. So he'd been going to the same spot for about 9 years, probably once or twice every month, one or two weekends out of every month, like year round. So he'd been there a couple hundred times. And so in one of these recordings, he had this grunt or this cry or something that Adam had heard, and Adam had heard the same sound when he was out there in his previous Bigfoot expedition out in the Cascades in 2012, just before I met him up with him in New York. So he said, that's the same thing that I heard. So he's definitely, he said, I think this guy has Bigfoot up there. So we drove down from the Olympic Peninsula, after the Olympic Project weekend, and we met up with Matt and his fiance, Cynthia, at their home in Puyallup, Washington, and we had dinner there, and they're very, very nice people, and they fed us and had us stay over, and at their home, it was nice to sleep in a bed for a night, and the next day, we took Matt's Suburban. He had the old beat-up Ford Suburban, and thankfully I didn't have to take the rental car because it would have gotten trashed. We drove down to Southern Oregon to this place where he does his his habituation, and so it was about an 8-hour drive. And this place, I guess, was about 70 miles north of California. So we went all the way down through Washington into Oregon. And, we go through the town there and found this trail, this old logging road that goes up a mountain ridge. And it's about, 10 miles up this road. And it was really, at once, on the passenger side, there was just like a steep drop, like about a foot from where the tire is. And the road was really, really pitted and big, deep ruts. And it was all overgrown in spots where we had to pull in the side view mirrors so they wouldn't get ripped off. It was like a tunnel of vegetation. And we finally get out to the top of it. And where it ended like in a circle, I guess, where the vehicles can turn around. So, and then, at the 12 o'clock position of the circle where it ends, there's a little footpath through the woods. And on either side, it on the right side, like at the 3 o'clock position, it falls. If you hike in there, it falls away real steeply. And on the other side, you can hike into the woods a little further, but then again, it falls off real steeply. So it was like on a ridge, basically, and very, very wooded and remote. There were some houses, I think, further down in the valley, but, it was very, very remote spot. And, so we get there, and Matt is explaining to us, how he does he's explaining his methodology to us. And he said, look, he said, I don't do cameras. He said, I try doing that, and, that scares, they're too intelligent for that, and we'll only scare them off. So we don't do cameras. We don't do flashlights. We keep it dark at night. And they come out at night, and so, we'll go and do some fun stuff during the day, and then we'll come back at night, and that's when the activity starts. So we did some nice, activities, went to Crater Lake, and we did some jet boat riding on the Rogue River, and we did some fun things during the day. But at night, we went back to the camp, and we stayed we stayed there, and we stayed up late. First night, he said, don't expect too much the first night. He goes, they're usually kind of checking us out at a distance, and not a lot of activity happens the first night, which was true. We didn't really hear or see much. And then the second night, the second night was more active. We heard, heavy bipedal footsteps in the woods around us. Definitely seemed to be something nearby, but it was too dark really to see anything. And although it was very, very clear, there was the whole time we were there 4 nights, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, and we left on a Friday. The whole week was clear, not a cloud in the sky, very low humidity. And we had a full moon on the last night, so the moon was really bright. So we did have some light just from the moon. And I could see from the trees on the left at the 9 o'clock position, and the trees were kind of backlit by the moonlight, and I saw, large silhouettes move a couple times in between the trees. I found a big footprint in the middle of the path the following day. Matt put out these gifting bowls with food items in them, and they're stainless steel bowls, and he was very careful to, wipe the edges, and he wore rubber gloves so he didn't leave any fingerprints on them. And and we set these bowls out about 300 yards, I guess, from the site. And the next morning there was very, very big, greasy-looking fingerprints and thumbprints on the sides of the bowl. So, it was pretty interesting, pretty compelling, I thought. And then, but again, we didn't see any clear sightings of anything. But certainly it seemed that, there was some activity in the area, and we were hearing things and hearing the footsteps and all. So that was the second night. And the third night, we stayed up a little bit later. Instead of going to bed like 1:30, we were up till about 2:30, and I think we were thinking about, call it a night pretty soon. But Adam, he used to smoke. I think he quit, but Dr. Johnson is not a fan. He's got asthma, I think, and he said, if you're going to smoke, go in the back of the camp, go towards the entrance at I guess that would be the 6 o'clock area, behind the Suburban. So we go back there, and I'm not a smoker, but I like cigars when I go camping. So I just get those cheap backwoods that come in the pouches. And they used to be like $3. Now they're like $9 for a pack. But I like them. They keep away the bugs too. So I smoke those whenever I go camping. So I got a pack of these when we were out, and Adam had never had them before, and he took a liking to them. So I had to go buy a couple more bags of them, and we were smoking these backwood cigars back, towards, a little bit away from that, back towards the entrance of the camp. So back at like the 6 o'clock position, where the road enters into the camp area. And Adam and I are standing there, and we see this sort of kind of a mist about maybe 100 feet or so up the road. And it was kind of glowing a little bit, and almost like, the moonlight was kind of illuminating this mist. That's what I thought initially. And I said, well, it's strange that there's a mist, because there's kind of a steady breeze. Even though there was so much tree cover, we didn't really feel the breeze, but you could hear it kind of sighing through the woods. And it was super dry. Like I said, it was really, it was in the mid-90s during the day, but you didn't feel it at all. There was like no humidity. And so, that there should be a mist was kind of odd to me. And we're looking at it, and it's kind of getting brighter, this mist. We're looking at it, and it was about the width of the road, maybe hovering slightly above the road, or just above it. And maybe, so maybe about 10 feet wide, maybe about 6 feet high, kind of roughly oblong in shape, kind of this what I initially took to be is just sort of, a mist hanging above the road. But it started getting brighter, and it started to get brighter, and it was, glowing kind of a bright white color, and Matt Johnson comes walking over, and he said, what's that? And I'm like, I don't know. This is your place. I said, well, have you seen that before? He said, no. And so we're standing there at the entrance looking up the road at this thing, down the road, and it started to form an reddish orange glow in the center of the mist. And within it, we could see almost like you're looking into another world. There was like a dead, withered tree, and it was kind of this kind of barren looking landscape. And then we see these two small, squat, black creatures and they move out from this glowing red area, but the reddish glow seems to sort of continue to surround them. And they were, 3.5 feet high, maybe. They were humanoid in that, they were they were bipedal, 2 arms, 2 legs, upright. They were very robustly built. They were stocky. They didn't have much of a neck. That kind of a broad, flat-looking face from what we could see a bit in the dark. And they were black. Whether they had some kind of short black fur or they were just black, I don't know. But they were entirely dark-looking, and they had small, glowing red eyes. And these things kind of move out from this glowing area, and they're standing there, and they're sort of observing us, and we're observing them. And they're kind of, moving around, shifting a little bit. And but Adam and I both got a distinct sense that they were not expecting to see us up at that hour, and they were sort of waiting for us to go to bed, and they wanted us to go to sleep. Both of us had that very, very strong impression that these things didn't want us up watching them, and we were looking at them, and we're like, Adam and I were like, well, I don't know what those things are, and I'm not going to bed while they're, while those things are out there. I don't want them to enter into the perimeter of the camp, and who knows what they're going to do while we're asleep. So we're watching these things, and eventually, Dr. Johnson says, well, I'm going to bed. He goes, I'm not going to, I can't stay up all night with you guys. He said, I'm tired. He goes, he said, I'm going to go to bed, and, you guys can stay up and watch these things if you want. So, he's been there a lot of times, and I guess he has had other sort of paranormal experiences up there. Not these things. He had never seen them before, but I guess he felt comfortable enough that, that these weren't anything that were going to harm him. So, but Adam and I were not as confident in that, so we stayed up and we watched them. Now, the part of the story that is, for me, really disturbing is I talked about this a little earlier about my night terrors or whatever. That's what my parents said, if they were. I had these very, very vivid dreams, and I wrote about this on my blog in July of 2010, almost 4 years earlier, about being visited by these short, squat, black entities as a child repeatedly. They would come into my room, and there was once I bumped into one in the hallway when I had gone into the bathroom. And I went out of the bathroom, and I saw one. I remember telling my parents, I saw one. I wasn't in I wasn't in bed. I wasn't asleep. I saw one. I bumped into it in the hallway. And they said, of course, you were sleepwalking. So, but I had these, repeated encounters with short, squat, black entities. So what comes out of this freaking portal or whatever it was short, squat, black entities. These were the same things that I saw as a child. And here they are 40 years or more later showing up on the side of this mountain in southern Oregon, and they were the same things. And that's the part of the story that gets, in the telling, usually gets ignored. But I think that's not, and believe me, I'm not trying to make the story about me. I'd rather that it was not, I'd rather that this was not the case. I would have rather seen gnomes with little pointy hats or something, or gray aliens or something, other than these damn things that I saw as a child. But they were the same things, and I know that doesn't fit the narrative that is likes to be told, but it's I think that's significant that these were the same beings. So I'm looking at these things, and I got angry. After the initial shock and fear of seeing these things, you know what? It's almost. I hate to make the comparison, but it's almost like somebody who's abused as a child, and you suddenly see your abuser as an adult, and initially there might be fear, anxiety, and then you get angry, and that's what I felt, and I said, you know what, like these things, again, after all these years, now these things are and I got angry, and so I started to walk toward them down the road, and I yelled at him. I said, hey, I was like, why don't you, I don't remember what I said, but I said, we're not going to bed. I was like, it's like, Adam and I, like, these things are waiting for us to go to sleep so they could do whatever they're planning on to do to us. And I said, I said, we're not going to go to bed. What do you think of that? And like, why don't you go back to where you came from? Or I can't remember specifically. I said something to that effect, and I yelled at him. I kind of screamed at them because I got angry, and I'm like, you're not going to come back and mess with me after all these years. And Adam's like, says to me, he goes, look, don't get any closer, back up, don't get close to those things, and that portal or whatever it is. So I said, yeah, you know what, you're right. So I started back up to where he was standing at the entrance of the road, and these things started to move forward toward us. And then they started to run, and then they broke out into a full sprint. And before they know it, Adam was like, they're rushing us, they're charging at us. And I said, yeah, I know. I said, because, you're looking at that and you're trying to, am I hallucinating this? And, everything he said is exactly what I was observing. And everything, Dr. Johnson said too, is like, so it wasn't like this, we were seeing different things. We were all observing and describing the same thing the same way. At this point, Dr. J had gone to bed. It was just Adam and I. And these things ran at us. They were within about 10 feet of us. And you could see their faces. And they were the same things that I saw as a kid, for whatever that means. But they got close to us, and they were angry. I don't know what they would have done if they caught us, but and I realize this part sounds silly, but we whipped out our flashlights. We had our flashlights on, and we pointed it directly at them. At the same time, the only thing I could think of was, I've heard in these cases, like if you rebuke them in the name of Jesus Christ, that, that's a way to ward off these type of things, these entities, evil spirits. So I said, something like, get back in the name of Lord Jesus Christ or something like that. And we hit them with the flashlight beams, and they literally just instantly disappeared. And this glowing mass up the road there blinked out. But within, I mean, it was terrifying. I mean, these things ran right directly at us, and what they would have done if they reached us, I don't know. I mean, they were a lot smaller than we were, but I mean, it was a terrifying experience, and then this, within a few minutes, this glow, almost immediately, within a minute or so, this mist or whatever starts to, reappear, and it starts to get steadily brighter, almost like it was powering up again. And then within about 10 minutes, it was bright again, full strength, I guess. And again, the orangey red, fiery looking center formed, and out popped these things. So it was almost like some sort of mechanism, like this thing shut down and then had to power up. But it seemed like every time we hit it with a flashlight, I don't know if it was that or the rebuking in the name of the Lord, or maybe both, but it seemed to shut it off. And then it seemed like it was some period of time that it had to reboot itself, and then these things came out. So it seemed like almost, in a way, a mechanical mechanism to some degree, like the way that it shut off and then it had to sort of slowly power up. So this happened on the third night. Then again on the fourth and final night, same thing, same time, about 2:30 a.m. We got back there to the camp and to the habituation area, and I should say in the morning there was I stayed up. I was asleep at my feet by 4:45 in the morning, and Adam said, "Look," he goes, "the sun will be up in a few minutes." He goes, "Why don't you just go to sleep, and I'll keep watch. I'll yell if there's anything going on." So I laid down on the cot. That was another thing. We had to sleep in cots outside. That's part of the Dr. Johnson's rules. So we had to sleep outside in cots. So I just laid down on the cot, and Adam woke me up, seemed like about 15 minutes later. He goes, "John, there's something in the bushes there." So I get up, I sit up in the cot, and I lean forward, and I hear this really loud roar, and it came from well above our heads. I mean, it wasn't, all they had there. I mean, we saw a black bear up there, but I mean, the most a black bear was 10 feet tall. I mean, it came up from above the head, and it was a very kind of guttural, very primate sounding bellow, very, very loud, and coming from the bushes. So I don't think that had anything to do with those entities that we saw the night before. But so again, during the day, we went out and did some fun stuff, and it was a beautiful, bright, sunny day the next day, and nothing, nothing happened the night before. But we got back in the evening, at about dusk, back to the camp, and there was just kind of a heaviness. We felt like we were going to be in for another night with these things. There's just kind of that sense, and Dr. Johnson's ex-wife and his little son lives in the town nearby, so he brought him up there, and it was funny. We had a couple folding tables set up, and there were a bunch of a big case of water bottles that we bought, just so we had water to drink. And and I'm talking with Matt and Adam, and my back's to the table. We're about 15, 20 feet away from the table, and I feel something land at my heels behind me, and it sounds, like a water bottle. There's kind of a crunch of the plastic and a swoosh of the water. And I look around, there's a water bottle at my feet, but right behind me. And Dr. J's son is sitting in this chair next to me, and he's real wide-eyed, and he says, "That water bottle just floated from the table all by itself." And I said, and Matt Johnson, he was kind of just dismissed it. He said, well, he goes, that's some of the squatches come in and they're cloaked. So they like to, they probably just tossed it over to, mess with us. I said, okay. So, but, there's definitely was some kind of other supernatural kind of, paranormal stuff going on up there. Also, with the when we saw this glowing mass, we saw like orbs when it started to power up. We saw like some orbs of light and like some flashes, like sparks or like old flash bulbs going off. And one kind of like shot like a shooting star over the road. So there was like some orbs too going on in conjunction with this this glowing mass. So the fourth night, we go through the whole. It was basically a repeat of the third night, except they didn't run at us because I didn't mouth off to them. But I think I learned my lesson on that. I didn't really want those things charging us again. But we went through the whole thing. Same thing about 2:30 in the morning. Adam and I were up all night with those things until dawn, and as the sun came up, it disappeared. But that's and then the next day, I said to him like, hey, how would you describe it? And he said, short, squat, very robustly built. They were black. We were all seeing the same things, and it was over a extended period of time. It wasn't as if it was like some fleeting glimpse of something that could have been, a raccoon or possum or something. We saw these entities, and they were within close proximity of us, from about 2:30 a.m. to about, 5 a.m. for 2 nights in a row. And we were it was kind of like a standoff. We were, guarding the entrance, and they were, and hoping that they wouldn't try to enter. And we were up all night with these things. And you know what? If I had been alone, I might have questioned my sanity or thought I was hallucinating. But we all three saw these things, and we all described them the same way. And the disturbing thing to me is that these were the same things that I saw as a kid. So, I don't know if there's some sort of attachment that I have, or maybe there's something about that location at Southern Oregon that, because, I know Dr. J has had other sort of, paranormal sort of experiences. I think that he mainly attributes to the Bigfoot, and but maybe there's something specific to that area that allowed these things to manifest themselves physically. But they were the same things that I dealt with as a child. So that's something that I've been trying to come to grips with and understand. And I don't think they're anything good. I don't, and I know Adam is in agreement with me on that. I mean, I think he leans a little bit more toward the idea that they're interdimensional. I don't know. I guess I think I'm a little bit more of the opinion that they're demonic. I know Dr. Johnson seems to think that there's some sort of friendly guardians of the portal and that we were accidentally triggering the portal. I really, disagree with that. I don't think they were anything nice. And the fact is that they were the same damn things that I saw as a kid. And that's part of the story kind of gets left out because I don't think it fits the narrative that well, about the friendly guardians, but they were the same freaking things I saw as a child. And, that's been messing with me, and it's been hard on Adam too. I mean, he's, he came out there as, he's a scientific researcher. He's looking for DNA evidence and hair samples. He's not a guy that's really into the paranormal stuff, or has had a lot of experience with it. And then, he had this, and honestly, he and I were not going to talk about it, but about 10 months later in, June or about April of last year, Dr. Johnson kind of went public with it, and I guess we felt compelled to sort of tell our side of it. And, you know, for the most part, we're in agreement, except about the nature of these things. He's still promoting the idea that they were harmless, benign entities, and you know, I don't agree with that at all. And you know, neither does Adam, even though, you know, we may have different ideas about the nature of them. We both don't think they were nice in the least, or had any kind of good intentions. And I know there are people that don't care for Dr. Johnson. I mean, like I said, I personally got along fine with the guy, and I know people are thinking everything he says is, you know, has to be a hoax. But you know, I really, really am quite sure that this wasn't any kind of hoax. I mean, he would have had to have some kind of special effects crew from Hollywood, you know, hanging out in the woods someplace to pull this thing off. I mean, these things got close enough for us to see them, and you know, it was not something that was it wasn't a hoax. I mean, I think unless he's some sort of really fabulous actor, I think he was really pretty rattled himself when he first saw these things. I don't think it was anything he was trying to pull on us, or, you know, I don't think he's a liar. I mean, I can't comment on any of his research, you know, before or since I've been there, but just this particular, you know, incident involving whatever these entities were, you know, we weren't hoaxed. I'm very, very sure of that. They weren't midgets. In fact, I even joked with them the next day. I said, you know, where'd you go to hire the midgets in the costumes? Yeah, he kind of laughed, and he says, you know, because I told you I'm not a hoaxer. And I said, I believe we were not hoaxed, believe me. So, I mean, this is, you know, it was just a really, really weird experience. I'm grateful at least there were other people there, because then I might have, you know, checked myself into a mental hospital or something. But other people saw it. Even the kid did, his son. The poor little guy was pretty freaked out. So, you know, bizarre story, and I've been trying to figure it out. And, you know, I've been leaning more toward a religious explanation. But I know we're going on pretty long. I'll let you know.
No, I see, that's the beauty of this show, my friend. When a good story comes around, I think I have enough broadcasting experience just to shut up and listen. Not a lot of people do that. I have no problem shutting up and listening. And I can tell you right now, the goosebumps over that story. And I know, reading some of the comments in the chat rooms, people were like, holy crap, how am I sleeping tonight after this one? It's them dark shadow gnomes.
They're not Carlson's insane. Carlson's full of shit.
No, they're good. You know, but honestly, you know, these red-eyed shadow gnomes, man, you got to get away from the gnomes. That's all I'm saying. You know,
they're gnome-like enough. They didn't have cute little hats, but, you know, as far as I could tell, they weren't wearing anything. They were just black. But you know, they were the same things that I saw as a kid, and that's troubling to me. And you know, I've been reading up on demonology and exorcism and that sort of thing, and that's kind of the direction I'm going with in my research. I'm sort of, I guess, falling back onto my Catholic upbringing and that's not to say that that's an explanation for everything, but I do think these things had something to do with me. I know Dr. J has said that he has opened the portal like 4 more times in subsequent visits. Adam's been back there a couple of times just recently, and has had some weird experiences at that same location. But nobody, not Adam or Dr. Johnson, has seen these short, squat, black entities other than the time that I was there. So, and like I said, they were the same things that I saw as a kid. So that's got to mean something. I think they had something to do with me. I mean, maybe next time we went back there, somebody, it might have manifested in, something else that, maybe, if you're scared of clowns and you go back there, somebody might see clowns, it could be some sort of trickster element to it,
That's all I need. Gnomes and clowns, my friend. Why not throw in some great white sharks as well while we're there?
Yeah, why not?
Because Dave doesn't do the ocean. Dave's a meal, not an appetizer, a meal. John, I'm going to get you to hold on. I'm going to wrap this thing up here, my friend. John Carlson's our guest tonight on the Mighty SOR. We went a little over, but that's okay. If you're listening on the Spaced Out Radio side, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL is taking us home with the little Brother Is Watching. And Bumblefoot is the official sound of this show. He brings us in and takes us home every single night. Tomorrow night on the show at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com. It's our birthday, second anniversary show. We got a bunch of people coming in. I hope you join us as well. Put your party hats on, those crazy little pointy gnome hats that they wear. Go to the dollar store, pick some up. Thank you so much for listening in tonight. Love y'all. Lots of good comments in the chat rooms, and we will take it easy. See you tomorrow night, spacedoutradio.com. Remember, do us a favor. Tell a friend. That's how we're going to grow this. 25,000. Who wants to be 25,001? You tell me. Talk to you later. Good night.